What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty. Join my Discord if you want to chat and share your thoughts, the link is in the description. 6SL Chapter 109 Cooldown time reset to 0, the second template is opening, open black lens bracket subscribe close black lens bracket. Li Yi looked at everyone with a playful face, and at this moment Nick and the others also had complex expressions on their faces. Who would have thought that they fought Li Yi to death, but now they have to work under him. For a moment, everyone looked at Li Yi with some incomprehensible emotions. Okay. There's no need to mention the past, you just have to work hard in the future. Little Spider-Man, Li Yi reassured everyone and then spoke. After saying that, Little Spider-Man came out of the shadows immediately, Master. Introduce the current situation to the three of Nick, and then, the four of you will be responsible for all matters under my command in the future. Do you understand 003? Clear. Little Spider-Man nodded, then looked at the three of Nick and said with a smile on his face, you three, come with me. Advertisement, trouble. The three of Nick looked at Little Spider-Man, nodded, and then left the office with Little Spider-Man. After they left, only Li Yi, Nyasha and Posey were left in the office. If one were to say, among the crowd, who was the most difficult to appease, it must be the two women. They both had skin-to-skin relationship with Li Yi, but they were killed by Li Yi without any hesitation. Now facing Li Yi again, even with the shackles of the Shadow Kingdom, Wei and the two girls couldn't help but feel resentment in their hearts. Looking at the two, a smile appeared on the corner of Li Yi's mouth, then he got up and walked towards the two women, and directly reached out and pinched the two women's shins. Why, from the looks of you, it seems that you hate me very much. Don't dare, Master. The two women said in unison, saying so, but their eyes betrayed them. Advertisement seeing this, Li Yi laughed indifferently. It doesn't matter if you hate me, whether you hate me or not, the two of you will never be able to escape my grasp in this lifetime. While talking, Li Yi's fingertips slowly brushed across the faces of the two women, a feeling of electric shock made the figures of the two women tremble at the same time, and the CBFI eyes looking at Li Yi gradually change, complicated. Soon, in Li Yi's office, a symphony played slowly, one after another. On the other side, under the explanation of Little Spider-Man, the three of Nick also gradually understood the current situation. After knowing that Li Yi had completely occupied Malegian, Nick couldn't help opening his mouth, and finally didn't say a word, just a wry smile appeared on his face. Obviously, this news made him feel uncomfortable. After all, he had worked hard to resist Li Yi at the beginning, but now, Li Yi still occupies Malegian. That is to say, his efforts at the beginning were basically ineffective. This is undoubtedly a blow to the confident Nick. In contrast, Dr. Octopus and Norman didn't feel much about it. They were a scientist and an entrepreneur, and they only cared about their research and company. They didn't feel much about the fall of Magian. In a blink of an eye, several months have passed. Under the attack of the Black Shadow Corps, everyone in the world is in danger, but it is useless. Their methods cannot help the Black Shadow Corps. In just a few months, there are 10 more several small countries fell, and the territory of the Shadow Kingdom grew stronger. Just when Li Yi thought that he would continue to stay in this world for a while, on this day, the voice of the system suddenly rang in Li Yi's ears. Ding, the 1-year cooldown period has expired, and the second template is activated, close black lens bracket. Chapter 110 Holy Master Template, Armor Warrior Template, Tiga Template, open black lens bracket subscribe close black lens bracket. In a mansion in Niuyue City, the sound of the system awakened Li Yi from his deep sleep, and he broke free from his two pairs of jade arms. Li Yi glanced at the two sleeping women beside him, got up, washed up, and then walked out of the room, came to the living room. After pressing the service bell, the servant brought breakfast. Li Yi opened the system panel while eating breakfast. Ding, the 1-year cooldown period has expired, and the second template is being opened, close black lens bracket. Please choose one of the following templates. Close black lens bracket open black lens bracket Holy Master Template close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket Armor Warrior Template close black lens bracket open black lens bracket Tiga Template close black lens bracket. Looking at the three template options given by the system, Li Yi couldn't help but blinked. My good guy, what do you want to do with all three templates? At this moment, Li Yi scratched his head involuntarily. The template of the Holy Lord came from a certain adventure book. Among other things, the ability of the 12 spells is enough to make people greedy. Besides, the power of the Holy Lord originally is not the same. Xiaoke. The Armor Warrior Template, Li Yi glanced at the detailed introduction. Choose this template, you can get a total of 6 sets of armor. Yanlong, Fengying, Land Tiger, Black Rhino, Snow Mastiff, Emperor. No doubt, it's also good stuff. Armor, the ultimate man's dream, has it. As for the Dija template, it is even simpler. Who hasn't become a light when he was young? Advertisement in short, all three options are good things, so the question is, which one to choose? Li Yi fell into an unprecedented state of entanglement. No matter which one he gave up, he was reluctant. Helpless, Li Yi chose the old way. I will choose whoever the little rooster points to. Closing his eyes, he clicked randomly, and finally Li Yi's finger pointed to the Holy Master Template. Yeah, it's God's will. Li Yi shrugged, no longer entangled, and directly chose the Holy Master Template. Template selection is successful. A new world is about to open. Countdown, 10, 9, 8. Seeing the prompt flash by the system, Li Yi was stunned for a moment, and in the next second, his figure disappeared in place in an instant. A minute later, with a flash of space, Li Yi's figure appeared in front of the dining table again. Well, I can come back, that's no problem, new world, let's go. In Marvel World number 2, not long after Tony and others successfully walked out of the gate of multidimensionality, a wave of space fluctuation emerged, and the figure of Ancient One appeared in front of everyone in the next second. Mr. Ancient One. Advertisement. Looking at Ancient One, everyone quickly saluted and said hello, which is a respect for the strong. Ancient One nodded to Nick and others, then raised his hand and threw the Tesseract immediately in front of Miyake. Asking for flowers. This thing, you take care of it. Thank you, Mr. Ancient One. Nick quickly thanked, and took the Tesseract with both hands. This item is very important. I hope you can keep it safe. In addition, the world has begun to change. I hope that you can unite all the forces that can be united in the future to deal with the coming disaster. Disaster? Magician, I don't know what you mean by that? Hearing what Ancient One said, Nick couldn't help but feel a slight jump in his heart, and a bad premonition couldn't help rising from his heart. This time, you traveled through other universes, and you have been targeted by that demon. One day, he will come to this world and end the karma with you. How? Magician, that demon, how did he come to our world? I don't know either. Just now, I returned to this world and received a warning from the world. The will of the world is in fear. I hope you can prepare well for the coming disaster. Ancient One spoke faintly, and after finishing speaking, he ignored Nick, raised his hand and rolled up Tony and the three of them, and disappeared directly in place 6. Chapter 111. Awaken the blood of the dragon with the sacrifice of thousands of people. Open black lens bracket. Subscribe close black lens bracket. World number 2. A year has passed in the blink of an eye since the Girl Date War. The words of Ancient One at the time made Nick and the others tremble with fear, and they couldn't sleep well for several days. Peace, no alien invasion, and no extraordinary beings causing trouble. This made everyone in S.H.I.E.L.D. relax. And a year later, in a certain alley in Queens, suddenly, a spatial fluctuation emerged, and Li Yi's 750 figure quietly walked out of it. Looking at the surrounding environment, Li Yi frowned. He remembered that when he came here for the first time, the place was not here. Why did he go back once and come back again? So he just changed places. Some people don't understand the principle of this, but Li Yi didn't get entangled, and directly opened the system panel to check the loading status of the template. Open black lens bracket. Name. Li Yi. Close black lens bracket. Loading task of the first stage of the Holy Master template. Dragon Ritual 1. Mission details. Use thousands of people as sacrifices to awaken the blood of the dragon, complete the mission, and start Dragon Sacrifice 2. Black Shadow Core. Rejected by the world, temporarily unavailable. Looking at the information on the panel, Li Yi's brows suddenly frowned. The addition conditions of the Black Shadow template were different. The condition for adding the Shadow template is to erode the world, and the Holy Master template requires him to complete the Dragon Sacrifice. Definitely, this is not important. What is important is that the core was rejected by this world. After getting this information, Li Yi subconsciously called the Shadow Core, but there was no movement. Seeing this, Li Yi tried his ability again. Immediately, his figure turned into a black mist and disappeared in place, and then reappeared very quickly. Advertisement. His ability can be used, and the Black Shadow Kingdom can also enter, but unlike the previous Black Shadow Kingdom, the previous Black Shadow Kingdom can be said to be alive, but in the second world, under the situation of being suppressed by the world, the Black Shadow Kingdom everything in it seemed to be solidified. No wonder it was difficult for me to summon the Shadow Core. I was suppressed by the world, and the Shadow Core couldn't even move. How could I summon it? Fortunately, this kind of suppression is not permanent suppression. When the influence of oneself on this world is getting bigger and bigger, then the Shadow Kingdom will naturally erode the world slowly. After the erosion reaches a certain level, the Shadow Core will also be able to reappear out of this world. Knowing the situation, Li Yi shrugged his shoulders, walked out of the alley, looked at the streets with people coming and going. Li Yi touched his empty pocket again. Well, I forgot to bring money. He put some rice gold in the Shadow Kingdom, but now even the Shadow Core can't get out of the Shadow Kingdom, let alone other things. It seems that I can only go back to my old business. Muttering something in his mouth, Li Yi's eyes quickly locked on a black gangster. At that moment, Li Yi greeted him with a smile on his face. Under his guidance, the black gangster followed him back to the alley smoothly. A few minutes later, Li Yi walked out of the alley with the ticket in his hand, raised his hand to hail a taxi, and went straight to the hotel. Regardless of the world in 1.4, first solve the residents. This is the idea engraved in the bones of the flower growers. Soon, the taxi stopped at the Hilton Hotel. Li Yi got out of the car and walked in, and successfully opened a business room with the money he had. I can't open the presidential package again. There is no way. The money is not enough. Song Neng felt wronged for a while. And just after Li Yi came to this world, the hidden destiny finally began to turn. Chapter 112. Sandman. Wilhelm Beck for his daughter. Open black lens bracket. Subscribe close black lens bracket. Niuyue's suburban prison. On this day, suddenly the alarm bell rang in the prison, and someone escaped from the prison. In the suburban forest, a white man ran wildly. He turned his head to look behind him from time to time, his eyes filled with panic. In the panic, the man inadvertently broke into a military test site. As a result, just as the military started the experiment, it gradually became deserted during the experiment. At night, Braun District, Wilhelm Baker carefully returned home, opened the window and entered the door. He saw his sleeping daughter and the leukemia diagnosis certificate on the table. Looking at the medical certificate, Baker froze in place as if struck by lightning. At this time, there was a noise from the direction of the kitchen, and a woman came out with a knife in hand. After 21 saw Baker, she couldn't help being stunned, and the table knife in her eyes fell to the ground. Why are you back? How is this going? Baker didn't answer the woman's question, but raised the medical certificate in his hand and said. Hearing this, tears flowed down the woman's eyes. Advertisement, last week, she suddenly fainted. I took her to the hospital, it turned out to be leukemia. I asked the doctor, as long as there is suitable bone marrow, it can recover after transplantation, but bone marrow transplantation requires a lot of money. Speaking of this, the woman was silent. The large amount of money she said was undoubtedly an astronomical figure for this family. Baker didn't ask how much he needed, but silently put down the medical certificate, then turned and walked towards the window. Where are you going? Seeing that Baker was leaving, the woman hurriedly asked. Baker's footsteps paused. I'm going to get money, take care of my daughter, and wait for me to come back. After finishing speaking, Baker left. The woman opened her mouth several times, wanting to say something, but looked at her daughter lying on the bed, and finally couldn't say a word, so she could only watch Baker leave. Hilton Hotel, Li Yi stretched out comfortably, and walked out of the room sleepily. After calling for breakfast, Li Yi turned and walked into the bathroom. After he finished washing, there was a knock on the door, and the waiter brought the breakfast into the room. Thanks. Advertisement. You're welcome, sir, and I wish you a pleasant meal. The waiter smiled, Li Yi nodded, and took the breakfast to the balcony, enjoying the breakfast while bathing in the morning sun and overlooking the busy streets below, feeling extremely comfortable. Opposite the Hilton Hotel was a bank. At the gate of the bank, a group of uniformed guards quickly opened the cordon at the gate of the bank. At the end of the street, there was a bright cash transport truck, and it was slowly driving towards the bank. Soon, the armored van stopped at the door of the bank, and the guards stepped forward to open the door, and took out boxes containing money from the car. Just when they were about to transport the box into the bank, suddenly, a gust of wind blew up in 583, and the next second, the crowd on the street let out exclamations. On the balcony, Li Yi heard the movement from below, and subconsciously turned his head to look at the end of the street, only to see a deserted Titan riding a sandstorm and sweeping towards the bank entrance. As Sandman approached the bank guards raised their guns vigilantly and shot at Sandman without saying a word. Da da da. Accompanied by the intense gunshots, the Great Emperor's bullets poured towards Sandman, but unfortunately, the bullets passed through Sandman's body, taking away nothing but a few wisps of fine sand. Sandman, on the other hand, controls the sand, sweeping across, directly defending the bank and overturning it to the ground. Chapter 113. 5 years ago, on Poland Avenue, the taxi driver was stabbed to death. Open black lens bracket. Subscribe close black lens bracket. Watching the Sandman raging on the street, Li Yi took a bite of the sandwich in his hand, and immediately watched it with relish. The special effects movie at close range is not for nothing. Just like that, Li Yi watched the murderous battle while eating breakfast. Although it wasn't long before the awakening ability, Sandman is now very familiar with his own ability. The security personnel of the bank did not hinder him at all. Soon, more than a dozen money boxes containing Mijin were all rolled up by Sandman. After getting what he wanted, Sandman was about to leave, but at this moment, tearing air sounds sounded behind him, and the next second, a red and blue figure rushed towards Sandman at an extremely fast speed. Boom! With a loud bang, Sandman's deserted arm was kicked off by someone, and the dozen or so money boxes he held in his hands fell to the ground in an instant, making a half-jingling sound. Seeing this scene, the expression on Sandman's face suddenly became angry, and a roar came out of his mouth, shaking the surroundings. At this time, Niu made an appointment with the citizen Spider-Man and finally saw Sandman's appearance clearly. Although Sandman's whole body has been sanded, his facial features condensed with sand are exactly the same as his original. Looking at that familiar yet unfamiliar face, the memories of a few years ago suddenly flooded Lil Spider-Man's mind. In an instant, his heart trembled, and his originally calm mood instantly became agitated, and a trace of anger rose crazily from his heart, making her unable to hold back, and shouted in a low voice, "It's you." Listening to Little Spider-Man's deep and angry growl, Sandman, who was still furious, was stunned for a moment. If he remembers correctly, he must have been sabotaged. Why does this guy look angrier than him? Sandman was puzzled, and then asked, "We know each other?" Advertisement. 5 years ago, on Polish Avenue, the taxi driver was stabbed to death. Little Spider-Man said through gritted teeth. Each word popped out of his mouth. Hearing this, the old man who was mistakenly killed by him suddenly appeared in Sandman's mind. "Are you his relative?" Sandman looked at Little Spider-Man in astonishment. Little Spider-Man immediately roared. "I am his nephew. I never thought that you would be released from prison. Then today, we will settle the score properly." Little Spider-Man shouted angrily, and then shot directly at the person. Looking at the approaching Spider-Man, I don't know whether it was out of guilt or other reasons, but Sandman didn't fight back, but rolled up the cash box from the ground with quicksand, and then turned into a sandstorm and ran away. "Stop and don't run." Spider-Man chased after Sandman and shouted loudly. Hearing this, Sandman naturally didn't stop, and directly raged through the street, affecting many innocent passers-by. As these two people left one after another, the street quickly quieted down, leaving only the panicked citizens behind. And on the balcony of the Hilton Hotel, just as the two Honuos left, Li Yi had just finished his lunch, put down the tableware, turned around and went back to his room to change his clothes, and then Li Yi's figure also disappeared in the room. They chased after Sandman. The reason why he wanted to chase the two of them was not only because he wanted to watch a show, but also because he wanted to win Sandman back. He has no one at hand right now, and he doesn't know how long it will take to gather the sacrifices in the dragon sacrifice one by himself alone, so he doesn't mind finding 2 helpers. Advertisement chapter 114. He can ignore himself, but he can't ignore his daughter. Open black lens bracket, subscribe close black lens bracket. On the city streets, the chase between Spider-Man and Sandman is still going on. Although Sandman's speed is not slow in the city, it is Spider-Man's home field. Soon, Spider-Man caught up with Sandman and launched an attack. But soon, something uncomfortable happened to him. His attack landed on Sandman, and apart from crushing a pile of fine sand, it couldn't affect Sandman at all. In addition, Sandman ignored his attack at all, so not only did he fail to intercept Sandman, but he also increased the distance between the two. Seeing that Sandman was about to walk away from his hand, suddenly, Spider-Man noticed the right palm that Killer 467 had been holding tightly. Inside is the money box that Sandman snatched from the bank. Seeing this scene, Spider-Man suddenly had an idea, and saw that he attacked again. This time, instead of attacking the vital point of the murder, he attacked his right wrist instead. Boom! With a loud noise, Sandman's right wrist was kicked off again, and the money box that he held tightly in his hand fell to the ground again. Ignoring his broken palm and looking at the falling cash box, Sandman's face suddenly showed anxiety. Advertisement. He raised his left hand and grabbed the cash box, planning, CBEA, to grab the cash box back. But at this moment, cobwebs stuck to the cash box faster than him. In the next second, Spider-Man pulled hard, and the cash box disappeared from Sandman's eyes. Seeing this, Sandman, who had been patient all along, finally couldn't bear it anymore. He can accept Spider-Man's attack on him. After all, he was really wrong in that matter. However, he could not accept that the money box was taken back. To others, the box contained money, but to him, the box contained his daughter's life. He cannot care about himself, but he cannot care about his daughter. At that moment, Sandman became angry, and suddenly let out a loud shout, then raised his left palm, and slapped Spider-Man directly. A sharp wind hit Spider-Man, and Spider-Man quickly dodged Sandman's attack with his keen reflexes, and then launched a counterattack. 2 figures, one big and one small, fought frantically on the street. One of them wanted revenge, and the other wanted to save their daughter, so it could be said that they did not want their lives. Advertisement. All of a sudden, the whole street was filled with rumbling noises. Cars were smashed flat by Sandman, steel pipes were constantly thrown by the Spider-Man and smashed towards Sandman. The two were fighting inextricably, and at this moment, Spider-Man suddenly made a bold move, and he even threw the box containing the money flying out. Although he didn't know why Sandman was so obsessed with money, but since he wanted it, he would never give it to him. The money box was completely thrown away, and Sandman, who was already in anger, completely ran away. Hole, that's my money, Sandman yelled angrily. Hearing this, Spider-Man sneered, that's money from the bank. Anyway, I'm here today, so don't even try to take it away. Spider-Man spoke righteously. Upon hearing this, Sandman's face darkened immediately. D. You forced me. Sandman stared at Spider-Man, his tone full of extreme anger. In the next second, Sandman had a thought, and instead of hitting people with his fists, he controlled the fine sand in the sky, forming a small tornado that swept Spider-Man over. Chapter 115. Little Spider-Man v Sandman. Open black lens bracket, subscribe close black lens bracket. On the street, Sandman controls the sandstorm to rage wildly, and the small tornado formed by fine sand directly rolls towards Spider-Man. Seeing this scene, the pupils of Spider-Man's eyes shrank suddenly, and his figure sensitively shot cobwebs towards the tall buildings on both sides of the street, trying to avoid the tornado attack through the tall buildings. However, Sandman's speed of controlling the tornado was much faster than his action speed. He had just left the ground and was still in the air when the tornado roared towards him. Immediately, Spider-Man was directly involved in the tornado. Boom! 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 Intense crashes rang out crazily. In addition to the fine sand, there were all kinds of sundries in the tornado, such as street lamps, cars, trees, and so on. These things were mixed in the tornado, which caused great damage to Spider-Man. His body was constantly being hit by these sundries. Even though his physique was astonishing, there was no need for him to groan in pain. Damn it, it can't go on like this anymore. Realizing that his situation was not good, Spider-Man forced himself to calm down, and began to think about a solution. Sand. What are you most afraid of? Advertisement. Water. That's right, water. Water can melt sand. In an instant, Spider-Man found his way. While trying to avoid the debris in the tornado and resist the tearing force brought by the tornado, he quickly cast his eyes on both sides of the street to search for something. Soon, he found what he was looking for, and he was always on the fence. Without any hesitation, he raised his arm, shot out the cobweb, stuck to the fire hydrant, and pulled it hard. Crunch. A crisp sound emerged, and under his tremendous force, the fire hydrant split instantly, and the next second, a burst of water jets rushed out from the fire hydrant, covering the entire battlefield. Crash. The water sprayed crazily, directly drenching the tornado rider. In an instant, the raging dust tornado was doused with water and stopped immediately, and at the same time, a scream rang out from Spider-Man's ear. He looked in the direction of the sound, and saw that the tall murderer was gradually melting under the impact of the water. Advertisement. After realizing that he couldn't maintain his figure, Sandman couldn't help but panic. After all, he had just obtained the extraordinary ability not long ago, and he still didn't know how to deal with this situation. In addition, his body continued to melt, and a feeling of incomparable weakness flooded his heart. It made him feel a ray of fear involuntarily. Asterisk at the moment, he couldn't care about other things anymore, and started to turn around and run away. His body shattered and turned into quicksand, drilling towards the sewer. He wanted to leave here. But Spider-Man would not let him go easily. Seeing Sandman running away in a panic, Spider-Man quickly chased after him, lifted the manhole cover of the sewer directly, and rushed into it. The two chased and fled, crossed half of the urban area, and finally stopped in front of the sewer dam. Looking at the rushing groundwater in front of him, Sandman's face changed again and again. He was not sure if he would be washed away by the water if he fell into the water, and he would die completely. Therefore, looking at the rushing groundwater, he stopped. The footsteps froze in place. But he was stunned, but Spider-Man didn't. The moment he stopped, Spider-Man directly launched a surprise attack from behind and kicked towards him. Boom! This kick landed firmly on Sandman's body, kicked through his abdomen, and felt the abnormal movement on his body. Without thinking, Sandman turned around and punched out, immediately blasting Spider-Man out, hitting him heavily on the ground. The iron pipe of the sewer went up to earth. Chapter 116. You won't make me feel better, and I won't make it easier for you either. Open black lens bracket. Subscribe close black lens bracket. When a loud sound of a metal plate sounded, echoing in the sewer, Sandman watched another part of his body disappear, and couldn't help shouting. Why are you trying to make trouble with me? I just want to save my daughter. I will avenge my uncle, Spider-Man replied viciously, and then rushed forward again. Immediately, the two started a fierce fight in the sewer. In terms of 267, in terms of agility, Spider-Man was naturally superior, but in terms of strength, Sandman was much stronger than Spider-Man. Coupled with the narrow terrain in the sewer, Sandman can hold Spider-Man's punch, 10 punches, but Spider-Man can't hold Sandman's fist. In the end, it was clear that Sandman was hit by Spider-Man several times, but it didn't hurt. On the contrary, when Sandman hit Spider-Man for the second time, Spider-Man fell heavily into the water, unable to get up for a long time. You don't make me feel better, and I don't make it easier for you, let me die. After fighting to this point, Sandman was no longer guilty. Looking at the fallen Spider-Man, he braced his body and walked towards Spider-Man, wanting to finish him off completely. Advertisement. Seeing Sandman approaching, Spider-Man's gaze quickly looked around, and soon, his gaze fell on the iron pipe that accommodates the passage of groundwater. That is the city's water supply pipeline, which contains a lot of water. Looking at the pipe, Spider-Man immediately had a solution, and then he endured the pain, leapt onto the pipe. Afterwards, his hands firmly grasped the joint of the pipe. Open it for me, Spider-Man growled, and the pipes began shapeshifting. Sandman, who watched this scene, showed horror on his face. Don't. Clearly, he had realized something, but Spider-Man ignored him for the slightest bit, accompanied by a toothache sound and a crisp bang. The pipeline carrying the groundwater completely collapsed. Advertisement. In the next second, a large amount of water frantically poured in from the pipe, rushing towards Sandman. Being directly hit by the water flow, Sandman's whole body began to melt immediately, like a swamp monster, let out bursts of unwilling roars, and finally, was gradually washed away by the groundwater and disappeared in place. Watching Sandman disappear, the Spider-Man who tore the pipe finally heaved a sigh of relief, sat down on the pipe, panting heavily. And in the darkness behind him, Li Yi watched the scene quietly. Without his intervention, the confrontation between Spider-Man and Sandman was not much different from what was shown in the movie. However, he knew very well that Sandman didn't die so easily. Now, he just dissipated temporarily. After leaving the water, he could still reunite. At that moment, Li Yi glanced at the panting Spider-Man, and then his figure merged into the darkness and disappeared. Compared with Spider-Man, Sandman is obviously more suitable for doing things for himself. At the outlet of the underground water, Li Yi's figure quietly emerged, waiting patiently for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour. Just when Li Yi was getting impatient, suddenly, in the trickle of 5.8, a mud hand poked out of the water, and then the sand in the water began to condense gradually, slowly forming a human silhouette, and finally evolved into became Sandman. I've been waiting for you for a long time, and you finally come out. If you don't come out, my patience will be gone. Li Yi's flat voice sounded. Sandman's face froze suddenly, and he looked at Li Yi at the entrance of the passage coldly. Chapter 117. I can't guarantee that I will crush you to death. Open black lens bracket. Subscribe close black lens bracket. Who are you? Sandman looked at Li Yi vigilantly, and was ready to strike at any time, but he had just been washed by the current, and his strength dropped sharply, so he felt a little uncertain about making a move at this time. I am the one who can save you. Save me. Sorry, I don't need your help. Sandman didn't even think about it, he just shook his head and said. Seeing this, the corners of Li Yi's mouth couldn't help but slightly raise. Really? You don't need me to save you, so your daughter doesn't need me to save you either. F*K. Who are you and what do you want to do? Sandman, who was originally calm, became agitated after Li Yi mentioned his daughter. Looking at his eyes that wanted to eat people, the smile on Li Yi's face became even brighter, and he knew that he had pinched him to death. Don't get excited, otherwise, it's hard for me to guarantee whether I will crush you to death. Li Yi comforted, but Sandman was obviously not a soft persimmon. Suddenly, his figure moved instantly. Advertisement. A blast of sand swept directly towards Li Yi, covering his sight, and then, Sandman's fist followed closely behind, hitting Li Yi's head straight. Family is his taboo, whoever touches the taboo will die. At this moment, he didn't even want to know Li Yi's identity anymore. He dared to threaten himself with his family members. To Sandman, who he was not important anymore, he was going to die anyway. However, driven by anger, he ignored a problem. His strength was not at its peak, but Li Yi was waiting here for a long time. Boom! Li Yi blasted out with a fist, there was no frills, and the terrifying power exploded within a short distance. The terrifying power tore apart everything, Sandman felt an unrivaled force, and then he was blown out on the spot. Not only that, but his arm was directly blasted into gravel at this moment, completely shattered. Watching this scene, the corners of Li Yi's mouth raised slightly, and he shook his head. Do it? All right, then let me do something for you. While talking, Li Yi walked up to Sandman, and then he opened up with full strength. Advertisement Sandman had already realized his state after being blown away, but it was too late to wake up now. He could only brace his body to resist, and as a result, no surprise, Sandman was abused by Li Yi from the beginning to the end. Even if he was at his peak, he might not be Li Yi's opponent. What's more, he is not at his peak yet, so what can he use to fight Li Yi? After some activities, Li Yi twisted his neck comfortably, and looked at Sandman whose whole body was smashed to pieces, leaving only one head. Hearing this, Sandman, who only had one head left, said angrily, "What on earth do you want to do?" 037. It's very simple, I want you to help me with something, and in return, I can give you a large sum of money to help your daughter. No, do you think I will need your money with my abilities? Sandman proudly said that he did have the capital of arrogance. With his strength, if Spider-Man hadn't made trouble, he would have raised enough money long ago. You wouldn't think that I spent so much time finding you because I was trading stars with you. You have only two choices, either submit to me or die. Sorry, I don't want to choose either of these two choices, I choose the third. Sandman laughed, and then his head began to turn into quicksand. Chapter 118 Where did I get the money? I can only borrow a little from someone. Open black lens bracket, subscribe close black lens bracket. After experiencing the impact of the water flow, Sandman has stronger control over his body, and he also knows that he will not die even if he is washed by the water. Therefore, now, he wants to turn into quicksand and escape with the current. For his means, Li Yi really has no good way to stop him, but he doesn't need to stop him either. Just as Sandman's head was gradually turning into sand, Li Yi's indifferent voice sounded slowly, "If you leave, then I will kill your daughter right now." As soon as these words came out, Sandman's half-sanded head stopped immediately. He opened his mouth with only half of it left. "How dare you? You can try it, dare you?" Li Yi said with a smile. The words fell, Sandman fell silent, and used his daughter's life to gamble on whether Li Yi would dare to make a move, unless he was crazy. Otherwise, how could he bet on such a game that must lose? Immediately, the gravel flowed back quickly, and Sandman regained his figure in front of Li Yi. "Is this how you recruit people? Threat, coercion?" Sandman said through gritted teeth. Hearing this, Li Yi was not ashamed, but rather proud and said, "Thank you for the compliment. I ride a horse." Advertisement Sandman glanced at Li Yi speechlessly, completely speechless. "Okay, you won, say, what do you want me to do?" Sandman said in a slightly dejected manner. He never expected to meet such a scoundrel like Li Yi, and for a while, he felt a little tired. "No hurry, fulfill my promise to you." Li Yi smiled and said. Sandman's mood improved a lot as soon as he said this. At any rate, Li Yi still knew his promise, which made him feel a little comforted. "Okay, let's go." Hash plus hash equals Li Yi waved his hand, turned around and left. Sandman quickly followed, and then the two left the groundwater outlet together. Niuyue, Manhattan, at the door of a certain bank, Sandman looked at the bank in front of him, then at Li Yi. His face was full of astonishment. "Don't tell me you have no money." "Nonsense, where do I get the money? I can only find someone to borrow a little." Li Yi didn't even look back. Advertisement as soon as these words came out, the corners of Sandman's mouth couldn't help twitching crazily. What evil did I do to meet such a guy? Just when he was aggrieved by what happened to him, Li Yi's urging words suddenly sounded. "Okay, don't be dazed, grab it." While speaking, Li Yi also pushed Sandman, which made Sandman feel more helpless. He felt that Li Yi didn't come to rob the bank to help him, but came because he had no money. As for helping him, it was just incidental. What's more, the one who did it was the head of himself, and he had to accept his favor. This account was clearly settled by Li Yi. Shaking his head helplessly, Sandman no longer thought about it, and walked directly into the bank. Soon, a shrill alarm sounded in the bank. And Li Yi, at the moment, ordered a cup of Starbucks, Li Jiao, opposite the bank, drinking coffee while watching many citizens running out of the bank. On the other side, the Niuyue Public Security Bureau had just finished handling the last bank robbery case, and before they could breathe a sigh of relief, news of the Manhattan Bank being robbed came from the main station. Upon receiving this news, the commanders who led the team were stunned. What day is it today? They organized a group to rob a bank to celebrate. He was puzzled in his mind, but his movements were not slow, and he quickly called everyone to get on the car and rush to Manhattan. Chapter 119 Are you going to leave by yourself, or should I send you off? Open black lens bracket, subscribe close black lens bracket. Just as everyone from the Public Security Bureau was rushing to Manhattan, on the other side, little Spider-Man, who had just returned home, also heard the news on the radio. For a moment, he couldn't help being stunned. Another bank robbery. What's going on? I was puzzled thinking about it, but little Spider-Man's movements were not slow. He quickly put on the battlesuit, jumped out of the window, and rushed towards Manhattan. Hey, hurry up. Why are you dawdling? At the bank gate, Li Yi glanced at the time, then at Sandman who came out of the bank with a money bag, and urged dissatisfiedly. Listening to Li Yi forcing Lai Lai, The anger in Sandman's heart suddenly rose. This B asterisk 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 D, even if he doesn't work, he is still nagging. If he couldn't beat him, Sandman swore that he would tear Li Yi's mouth open. Soon, Sandman threw the money bag at Li Yi's feet and was about to sneer, when at this moment, an exclamation sounded from the tall building. "You're not dead." Hearing the sound, Sandman turned his head to look, and suddenly saw Spider-Man hanging upside down on the street lamp. Looking at Spider-Man, Sandman was also angry, and couldn't care less about Li Yi. "It's you again." Afterwards, without thinking about it, Sandman's body suddenly began to swell up, and in a blink of an eye, it turned into a huge amount of grit again, and wanted 197 to fight Spider-Man again. But having grasped his weakness, Spider-Man leapt to the fire hydrant without saying a word, intending to repeat the story just now. Seeing this scene, Sandman's expression changed slightly, and he immediately turned his head to look at Li Yi. "Help, help, don't tell me you still plan to watch the show." Before Sandman stared at Li Yi, he had endured it before, but this time, if Li Yi didn't help, then he really couldn't bear it. Seeing Sandman staring at him, Li Yi put down the coffee in his hand and said with a smile, "All right." After speaking, Li Yi got up and looked at little Spider-Man, while Sandman hid directly behind Li Yi to prevent being washed away by the current again. Seeing Li Yi standing up, the brows under Spider-Man's mask suddenly frowned. "Who are you?" "You will know in the future. Now, are you going to leave by yourself, or should I send you off?" "Advertisement," Li Yi said with a smile. "Little Spider-Man, my loyal subordinate." It seems that for the sake of little Spider-Man, he decided to give this Spider-Man a chance to choose. "HMPH, I should be the one asking you this question. Did you raise your hands and surrender, or did I beat you to kneel and surrender?" Spider-Man confronted Li Yi tit for tat without showing any weakness, and as his words fell, the smile on the corner of Li Yi's mouth also disappeared. "It's really a toast, and don't eat, it's fine to drink," Li Yi said with a sigh, and in the next second, his figure turned into a black mist and disappeared on the spot. When he reappeared, he was already standing behind Spider-Man. The whole process was very fast. At the extreme, it looks like teleportation, and even Spider-Man, who has the sense of a spider, can't do it. Looking at the Spider-Man with his back turned to him, Li Yi punched out, and the terrifying power exploded in the air, and there were bursts of rumbling sonic booms. "What? How is it possible? When did you appear behind me?" Hearing the movement behind him, Spider-Man let out an incredible exclamation, and then quickly put his hands on his chest, trying to resist Li Yi's blow. But in a hurry, he couldn't exert too much strength at all, and was directly blown away by Li Yi's punch. Rumble. Slamming heavily on the street, Spider-Man felt a sharp pain in his chest, feeling as if his bones were broken. However, after several years of growth, he is no longer that brat, but has become a mature superhero. Although the pain in his body is hard to bear, it is not enough to make him lose his fighting power. At that moment, his figure leapt and jumped directly from the ground. Then, in the next second, two cobwebs were sent out from his wrist to the left and right sides respectively, pulling up two cars and smashing them directly at Li Yi. There was a whistling sound, and two cars smashed towards Li Yi at a very fast speed, CBCC. Looking at the oncoming car, Li Yi had no intention of dodging at all. On the contrary, a disdainful smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. In the next second, Li Yi flew up with both feet and landed heavily on the car. Boom! The car made a loud noise, and then flew back at a faster speed, hitting Spider-Man directly. Seeing this, Spider-Man's expression changed slightly, and he jumped up quickly, dodging the car. But before he could breathe a sigh of relief, Li Yi suddenly appeared behind him, and said with a smile, "Is this all you have to do?" Advertisement. Hearing this, Spider-Man's heart tightened, and he didn't even want to turn around and punch. As a result, the fist hit the air, and there was no Li Yi behind him at all. This scene made his eyes freeze, and a bad premonition rose from his heart, and in the next second, the premonition came true. There was a burst of tearing air sounds behind him, and then a powerful force erupted directly behind him, kicking him flying out on the spot. "Wrong guess, I'm here." After kicking the Spider-Man away, Li Yi smiled and laughed at the wind. B asterisk 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 D, if you have the ability, fight me head to head. Li Yi's elusive appearance made Spider-Man a little nervous, and he couldn't help roaring and getting excited. But Li Yi is not fooled. There are easy methods to use, and he insists on going up the hard steel, and he is not mentally ill. At the moment, he ignored Spider-Man, and his figure disappeared in place again. As he disappeared, Spider-Man quickly became vigilant. His figure constantly circled around in place, looking around, for fear that Ji Yi would suddenly appear again. Unfortunately, even this is useless. Li Yi will always appear in the blind spot of his vision. Even if his sensing ability is outstanding, it will not help, because when he senses Li Yi has already made a move, which makes him want to hide time to hide. For a moment, the battle on the field completely turned into a one-sided beating. Li Yi relied on the means of surreptitiousness to torture Spider-Man to the point of death. Sandman, who was not far away, was stunned watching this scene, and at the same time couldn't help feeling a little grateful in his heart. Fortunately, I didn't really fall out with Li Yi, otherwise, Spider-Man's fate at this moment would be his fate. Maybe even worse than Spider-Man. After all, Spider-Man's reaction ability is much stronger than him. As a result, even Spider-Man can't react now, let alone him. Thinking of this, the way he looked at Li Yi became a lot more respectful. The strong are respected, this is an eternal truth. Li Yi relied on his daughter to threaten him before, but he refused to accept it. It can be seen that he has seen Li Yi's strength and methods. Although he is not completely convinced, At least he is completely convinced on the surface, and this is naturally a good thing for Li Yi. Start. Chapter 120 Kill enough, they will naturally not dare to come open black lens bracket subscription close black lens bracket. Woo! A siren sounded from far to near, at the gate of the bank. Listening to the siren whistling in the distance, and seeing Spider-Man lying on the ground panting heavily, Li Yi stretched his hands, turned and left. Coming to Sandman's side, Sandman glanced at Li Yi, then at the Spider-Man lying on the ground unable to move in the distance, and couldn't help whispering, "Don't you want to deal with him? Why, if you want to kill him, then you can do it yourself." Li Yi glanced at him and smiled indifferently. The little Spider-Man in another world is also working under him anyway, so he shows mercy to the Spider-Man in this world. But if Sandman wanted to kill Spider-Man, he wouldn't stop him. However, Sandman saw that Li Yi didn't intend to do anything. Even if he really had such thoughts in his heart, he didn't dare to move. At that moment, the two carried money bags and left the scene before the people from the Public Security Bureau arrived. After the two left, Spider-Man also struggled to get up from the ground, looking at the direction in which the two left, eyes full of complexities. He couldn't figure out why the two didn't kill him. In the end, with doubts in mind, Spider-Man also left. When the people from the Public Security Bureau arrived, all they were left with was a mess. S.H.I.E.L.D., an intelligence agent, hurried into Nick's office. "What's up?" Nick, who was dealing with official business, frowned slightly when he saw the intelligence personnel who broke in without knocking on the door. It's not that he was dissatisfied with the behavior of the intelligence personnel, but that something happened to him when he rushed in so hastily, which made Van Rong feel a little more solemn in his heart. Sure enough, after the intelligence officer spoke, he directly confirmed his thoughts. "Boss, Niu, there has been a supernatural crime again. Call out the surveillance screen." Nick directly gave the order, and the intelligence personnel started to operate immediately after the words were finished, and soon, two surveillance images were directly projected on the wall. The first picture is the scene of Sandman fighting Spider-Man for the first time, and the second picture is the scene of Ji fighting Spider-Man. When looking at the first picture, although Nick frowned slightly, his expression didn't change much. Having experienced so many things, supernatural crimes are no longer enough to make him change color. Advertisement. But after seeing the figure of Li Yi in the second picture, Nick, who was still able to maintain his calmness, suddenly changed color. Damn it, how could it be him? Nick's eyes widened, looking at Li Yi in the picture. Shu became excited instantly. He never imagined that after a year, he would actually see Li Yi in this world. Even if he had no direct contact with Li Yi at all, he had only seen information and photos of Li Yi. But for Li Yi, the guy who defeated S.H.I.E.L.D. in another world, and even almost ruled the beautiful and sharp guy, how could he not be deeply impressed? The intelligence personnel on the side couldn't help being startled when they saw Nick's reaction. In his impression, the director of his own department has always been a general. Now just an ordinary battle scene made him turn pale with shock. Such a scene can be said to be very rare. At that moment, he couldn't help but whispered, "Director, what's wrong with you?" Hearing what the intelligence officer said, Nick finally recovered from the shock, took a deep breath, quickly stabilized his mind, and then ordered decisively, "Go and check for me. Check the Asian in the surveillance. I want to know all the information about him. When did he come to Malegian? What did he do in Malegian? Even if he sleeps at night, he will find out for me." "Yes, Director." Seeing Nick's serious reaction, although the intelligence personnel didn't understand what happened, they quickly got into the mood and replied with a serious face. "Also, find Stark and the others for me. Inform them that there is an urgent mission, and ask them to put down everything in their hands and come to see me as soon as possible." "Clear, boss. Do you have any other orders?" "No, let's do it." "Then I'm going out first." The intelligence officer nodded, and then quickly left Nick's office to complete the task he ordered. After the intelligence personnel left, Nick looked at the figure of Li Yi in the surveillance screen, and said to himself with an ugly face, "It should be just a coincidence. That guy is in another world. It should be impossible to come to this world. Also, there is no figure of the Shadow Core. He should be the Li Yi of this world, right?" Asking for flowers. Nick comforted himself, trying to calm down his emotions, but a sense of uneasiness still involuntarily rose in his heart, making it difficult for him to calm down for a long time. On the other side, Li Yi, who didn't know that he had been discovered, took Sandman directly back to the hotel where he was, and began to divide the spoils. Advertisement this time, he robbed the bank and got a total of 5 million meters in gold. Don't be surprised, banks have money, but not every bank has a lot of cash on hand. 5 million meters in gold, Li Yi accepted 4 million unceremoniously, and lost 1 million to Sandman. This made Sandman frown rather dissatisfied. What's the matter with grabbing it by yourself, but the big head is still being given to Li Yi? But dissatisfaction is all dissatisfaction. After seeing the scene of Li Yi beating Spider-Man, he didn't dare to beat more. As for Li Yi, although he didn't know Sandman's inner thoughts, he could guess what Sandman was thinking by watching the changes in his expression. At that moment, Li Yi couldn't help but said, "Why, I think it's unfair, I got too much." "No," Sandman shook his head decisively in denial. Li Yi also minded, but still explained. "Your money is for your daughter's medical treatment, and it needs to be spent in an above-board manner. People from the tax bureau will definitely come to you later. The more you take in now, the more you'll pay back in taxes. Let me go, you need money later, and I'll give it to you, understand?" Hearing this, Sandman also reacted. It seems that this is indeed the case. The most powerful thing in Meijianshan is never the FBI but the tax bureau. Not to mention the money from robbery, even the money from selling fans, you still have to pay taxes. If you don't pay taxes, people from the tax bureau will stare at you like a mad dog. In short, they don't care how the money comes from, but they have to pay taxes. After realizing this, Sandman's dissatisfaction suddenly decreased a lot, but he still couldn't help asking, "Aren't you afraid?" "Don't be afraid. If they dare to come, I will dare to kill them. If they kill enough, they will naturally not dare to come. Well, if you want to say that, then I can do it too," Sandman said in disbelief. Hearing this, the corners of Li Yi's mouth suddenly raised. "Really, your wife and children are gone?" In a word, Sandman, who had just straightened his waist, struggled again. Chapter 121. So who's going to talk? Natasha Romanoff again. Open black lens bracket. Subscribe. Close black lens bracket. SHIELD conference room. After Nick issued the summoning order, everyone from Avengers came to SHIELD one after another. Including the captain and Stark, who were on vacation, also rushed back. As soon as he entered the door, Stark started nagging. "Nick, why are you calling us back in such a hurry? What happened again? The captain and I were just about to go to Men's Paradise, and the car was on the way. In the end, we were alone. The phone was cut off. Some things did happen, and I have no choice but to call you all back. As for the Man's Paradise, I don't know what it is." "Hey, you stay at SHIELD all day long, how could you have heard of it? Be careful of sudden death." "Okay, stop talking nonsense, let's take a seat first." Nick looked at Stark's ISP look, interrupted his words in dissatisfaction, and secretly swore in his heart when talking to 233 that when this matter was over, he would also go to Men's Paradise to take a good look. Suppressing other inexplicable thoughts, Nick looked around the entire meeting room. Stark, Captain, Black Widow, Bruce, Thor, and members of SHIELD are basically all present. At that moment, he quickly entered the stage, looked at the crowd and said, "Everyone, I have some bad news to tell you. We may be in big trouble soon." "Tell me, what's the trouble, and what else can we solve?" Stark waved his hand nonchalantly. It's not that he doesn't care, it's just that every time he encounters a difficult matter, Nick always uses this kind of rhetoric, and he's used to it. "Everyone, this time is different from the past. The trouble this time does not come from our world, but from the world a year ago." Nick spoke with a heavy tone, and when the words fell, everyone in the conference room left. In that world a year ago, everyone reacted in an instant, and then their faces quickly became serious at a speed visible to the naked eye. Although they didn't stay in World Number 1 for a long time, everyone left a deep impression on World Number 1. Whether it was the undying Black Shadow Corps or the SHIELD that was not nearly defeated, they all felt heavy in their hearts. Now, Nick suddenly told them that the trouble came from World Number 1, and everyone subconsciously heard the tragedy of SHIELD in that world. For a while, the atmosphere in the conference room became much more serious. "What's the specific situation?" Advertisement. The captain corrected his sitting posture and said with a serious expression. As his voice fell, Nick didn't talk nonsense, and directly raised his hand to signal everyone to look at the big screen, and then released the battle scene between Li Yi and Spider-Man, and finally fixed the scene on Li Yi. "I know some of you haven't seen this guy, let me introduce you now. According to the intelligence records of that world, this person is called Li Yi, and he is also the mastermind behind the defeat of SHIELD in that world. I have asked someone to investigate this person's information, and found that this person's information is blank. Preliminary inference, this person is not from our world, and is very likely to be the mastermind behind that world. However, there is a doubt at present, that is, this person does not seem to be able to summon the Shadow Corps. You can also see this from this part of the battle scene, there is no Shadow Corps. According to the information I learned in that world, this person generally rarely does it himself, and basically calls the Shadow Corps to fight. So, now, I'm not sure if he is Li Yi from that world." Nick said all his thoughts in one breath. After he finished speaking, the meeting room was quiet, and everyone was silently thinking without opening their mouths. After a long time, after everyone digested Nick's words, Stark said, "Then what are you thinking, Chief, to arrest him directly?" "My thoughts? Honestly, I don't know either." Nick spread his hands. "I have learned the specific information about that world, and the SHIELD of that world was eager to attack Li Yi, which finally led to the end of being almost defeated later." "Then observe for a while," Stark answered. "But I'm worried that he may be in some kind of weak moment now, unable to summon the Shadow Corps. If you give him time and let him summon the Shadow Corps, maybe the disaster in that world will be staged again in our world." Nick explained helplessly, and Stark was furious when he heard this. "This doesn't work, that doesn't work, so what do you want to do?" Advertisement. Seeing that the two were about to quarrel on the spot, Black Widow suddenly said, "Maybe, we can talk to him." "Okay." Immediately, everyone looked at Black Widow one after another, attracted by her words. Being watched by everyone, Black Widow was not nervous, but continued to speak calmly. "Leaving aside the matter of the other world, we have no hatred with Li Yi. I think, in this situation, we can have an open and honest talk about what he wants to do, and if possible, we can even help him accomplish his goal. Why do you have to beat him to death, aiming at him?" "But what if his purpose is unacceptable to us?" asked the captain, frowning. "If you can't accept it, let's fight. There is nothing to say about it, but before the fight, let's talk about it together, and there is no conflict. I think Natasha Romanoff has a good idea, what do you guys think?" Everyone, Nick agreed. Others did not speak, but sometimes not speaking is an attitude. Fighting, they don't want to fight for the time being, do nothing, and feel uneasy, so Natasha Romanoff's method can be said to be the best solution right now. In the end, Captain Magian also spoke in support. "Let's talk about it, first find out the purpose of that guy, then, who will talk about it?" The captain opened his mouth and pointed out a key question. At the moment of 4.1, everyone looked at Natasha Romanoff in unison. As far as negotiating means, Nick is naturally the most suitable. But getting in touch with Li Yi is not only a matter of negotiation, the key is also to find out his purpose and ideas. For this kind of thing, Nick, a big chimpanzee, is definitely not suitable, and even other people are not suitable. Only Natasha Romanoff is suitable. Being stared at by everyone, Natasha Romanoff also understood what they meant, and said with a smile, "It seems that you think I'm the most suitable candidate. Okay, if that's the case, let me go and talk to him. Please, pay attention to safety, we will be around when the time comes. There is nothing we can do, just send a letter to the soldiers." Why? Nick nodded and promised. Compared to the Nick in another world, the Nick in this world is more human. Chapter 122 Confused. I died. I killed it myself. Open black lens bracket subscription close black lens bracket. Hilton Hotel. People were coming and going. Suddenly, a black car stopped in front of the hotel, accompanied by a sudden sound of brakes. The car stopped steadily in front of the hotel. Crash. The car door was opened, and a pair of slender legs wrapped in black stockings and a pair of black leather high heels protruded out of the car. The next second, a gorgeously dressed woman in a professional suit stepped out of the car. With the appearance of Natasha Romanoff, many people coming in and out of the hotel turned their attention to her. The men's eyes lit up, they whistled, and they looked at Natasha Romanoff with fiery eyes. Natasha Romanoff has long been familiar with such a demeanor, and there is nothing strange in her heart, and she raised her legs and walked slowly towards the hotel without changing her expression. Miss 21, hello, do you have a reservation? The hotel receptionist looked at Natasha Romanoff and asked with a polite smile on her face. No, I'm looking for a customer from 7012, maybe you can inform me. Okay, wait. The front desk nodded with a smile and then dialed the phone. Beep, beep. In the hotel room, Li Yi was woken up by the sound of the phone, and grabbed the phone beside the bed with one hand. Li Yi said in a bad tone. If you don't give me a reason to wake me up, then you will pay the price for waking me up. Advertisement. Hearing Li Yi's unfriendly tone, the voice at the front desk on the other end of the phone suddenly became cautious. Hello distinguished guest, a friend of yours has arrived. I'm not sure of her identity, so I need to confirm with you. Friend? What's your name? The front desk listened to Li Yi's inquiry, and when the rain asked Natasha Romanoff. Natasha Romanoff. Natasha Romanoff reported her name with a smile on the corner of her mouth. After the front desk relayed, Li Yi, who was still a little confused, suddenly woke up. Huh? Interesting, I see, let her come up. Okay, doctor. After hanging up the phone, the receptionist breathed a sigh of relief, then turned to look at Natasha Romanoff and said, Miss, you can go up. Thanks. Natasha Romanoff nodded politely, then turned and walked towards the elevator. On the 12th floor, presidential suite, at the door of 7012, Natasha Romanoff gently knocked on the door. Click. The door opened, and Natasha Romanoff pushed the door open, and immediately saw Li Yi in pajamas sitting on the sofa. Advertisement, Mr. Li, hello. Looking at Li Yi, Tasha greeted Li Yi first. Hearing this, Li Yi glanced at Natasha Romanoff, and then a playful smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. You guys from S.H.I.E.L.D. are really interesting, are all the others dead? Negotiate with me, why are you here? Huh? Mr. Li, you mean, the other world is also me negotiating with you? Natasha Romanoff instantly captured the potential meaning of 110 in Li Yi's words. Definitely. Li Yi spread his hands, then you and I in another world should have a good chat. In a sense, yes. Li Yi looked Natasha Romanoff up and down, and said with a wanton smile on the corner of his mouth. The strange gaze made Natasha Romanoff suddenly feel uncomfortable, and she tried to change the subject. Then I don't know what happened to me in that world. Dead, I killed it myself. Li Yi narrated in a flat tone, and the expression on Natasha Romanoff's face suddenly froze. Li Yi's words were completely ignorant of the words she had prepared, and she didn't know how to continue the conversation. Chapter 123 What I dislike most is violence. I am a peace lover. I think, in this world, we should be able to have a better result. After a moment of sluggishness, Natasha Romanoff quickly reacted. As a top-level agent, a strong psychological quality is almost a must-have ability. Definitely, because deep down in my heart, for the man in front of him who killed himself in another world, Natasha Romanoff felt a little horrified, because the other party was able to kill himself in another world, which proved that he could not negotiate with Li Yi in the usual way. She had to change her mind. What would be a better outcome? Li Yi waved his hand and said casually. He picked up a wine glass, and the amber-like liquid in the glass was shaking. This is his custom-made high-strength tequila, which is comparable to the eau de vie. Whether it is there or here, in fact, all my actions are just protests against relevant parties of S.H.I.E.L.D. Drank the wine in one gulp. The pungent smell of wine permeates the entire room in an instant. Li Yi didn't change his face, he calmly spread out his hands, and said sincerely with his face. Actually, from the bottom of my heart, I am a peace-loving person, and what I dislike most is violence. Looking at the man's expression that didn't seem to be fake, Natasha Romanoff felt extremely troublesome. For some reason, when the words, most disgusted with violence, came out of this man's mouth, she really had goosebumps. The more unreasonable a person is, the more difficult it is to deal with, because you will never be able to fathom his psychology. This is what the instructor said to Natasha Romanoff when he experienced agent training in his early years, but at this moment it is very clear, and it appears in his own memory. Do not be nervous. Seeing Natasha Romanoff's body, she tensed gradually. Li Yi smiled and shook his head. It doesn't make any sense to do this, I came here to change. He said calmly. I believe that the purpose of S.H.I.E.L.D. sending you here is also to change. Standing in front of Li Yi, Natasha Romanoff felt an indescribable sense of oppression. She had clearly experienced countless dangers, and even confronted the leaders of various countries. He also entertained some seemingly majestic generals and marshals with bare hands. But only standing in front of this man, Natasha Romanoff will once again experience the sense of powerlessness that she has not experienced for a long time, as if any targeting and attack she made would be calmly resolved by the man in front of her. But his counterattack will overturn the whole world. She took a deep breath and forced herself to calm down. I don't know, how can we show our sincerity to Mr. Li Yi? We S.H.I.E.L.D. don't mean to be an enemy of Mr. Advertisement in the enchanting eyes, there is endless charm. She was originally a beautiful stunner who captivated all living beings. Maybe in that world we became enemies, but here we can be friends. Li Yi raised his head and looked at her. There was a deep and mysterious light in the black and white pupils. Tell me what you want, I like smart people who are flexible. Li Yi swaggered and sat on the sofa. The wine glass in his hand came out, ignoring the gravity of the earth, and slowly hanging in the air. The vodka bottle on the side was also suspended in the air, performing a void pouring in midair. Another strong man with a strange ability? Through the sensors on Natasha Romanoff, everyone in S.H.I.E.L.D. watched the scene in amazement. Although it has been expected for a long time, this Ji Yi must possess some terrifying abilities. But when the method of hanging objects in the air with one hand appeared, they were still in deep shock. Stark frowned and looked at the captain beside him. Is it magnetic levitation technology? Is it some kind of invisible metal gravity? Space Yuwu. This is obviously not something that technology can do. At this moment, in the luxurious presidential suite, Natasha Romanoff said frankly, we want to know the purpose of Mr. Li Yi's coming to New York. No, to be precise, the purpose of coming to this world. Come into this world? There is no purpose, I just want to change something. Why can the high-ranking rich people pass the so-called science, technology, and wisdom, recklessly preying on the lives of other people? Why do so-called warriors rely on the effects of those genetic medicines to crush weak human beings who are powerless? All rules and justice are based on the hero's free scale. Is this really justice? Li Yi said calmly. I want the real rules and standards to spread all over the world. Let all beings of all races breathe and grow freely under fair and just rules. That's the change I want to bring about. That's why I came here. Advertisement listening to the heroic declaration that contained great ambition in the calmness. Natasha Romanoff's heart skipped a beat. People who claim to change the world and reshape the world are not scary. What is frightening is that people with such ideals also have corresponding abilities. Everyone in S.H.I.E.L.D. looked at each other. The captain listened to what Li Yi said just now, and looked at Stark. The rich rely on technology, promote the so-called justice. The label on Stark is so dazzling, it almost fits perfectly with the person that Mr. Li Yi said. Captain, please don't look at me like this, after all, the super soldier serum on your body was created by my father. Stark's face was gloomy, feeling the gaze of the captain. As smart as him, why didn't he know the deep meaning hidden in the captain's gaze? In the luxurious room, Natasha Romanoff carefully tested Li Yi. Mr. Li Yi's ideals make me admire. To be honest, I admire such a person, and I have always wanted to cooperate with such a person with great ideals. Looking at Natasha Romanoff, with a cautious look on his face, Li Yi smiled nonchalantly. I don't mind negotiating with S.H.I.E.L.D., but before negotiating, I would like to see the sincerity of S.H.I.E.L.D. Excuse me, dear Mr. Li Yi, what kind of sincerity do you want to see? Natasha Romanoff took the initiative to come up. Her enchanting figure exuded a different kind of temptation, and her every move fully exuded female hormones. Zhao Li Zhao. Compare that to the heartless and lustless saint. Natasha Romanoff is better at dealing with opponents who want more. Li Yi smiled lightly and stretched out his hand calmly. He slowly poured the tequila in his hand along the neckline of Natasha Romanoff's tights and onto her collarbone. The amber-colored ice-cold liquor disappeared instantly among the ministers of the mountains. I hope that S.H.I.E.L.D. can provide me with some people, such as some heinous criminals, or some villains who have committed the most heinous crimes, but it is too late to arrest them. Li Yi thought lightly about the task of the dragon sacrifice. Sandman's side, of course, can be used as a line and become his effective helper. But if the situation permits, if you can activate S.H.I.E.L.D., use the S.H.I.E.L.D. here to let them help you solve the materials needed for the dragon sacrifice as soon as possible. Li Yi doesn't mind being lenient at the right time. After all, from the perspective of the heart, he still has a lot of love for individual people in S.H.I.E.L.D. Chapter 124 Civil War in S.H.I.E.L.D. Are you hungry, Mr. Lizardman? Not long after, Natasha Romanoff's sensor was artificially turned off. The electronic screen in front of everyone in S.H.I.E.L.D. fell into pitch blackness. They saw the last scene of the video transmission. A pair of vigorous and powerful palms, with a somewhat rough and brutal posture, tore open Natasha Romanoff's tight top. A group of men with sullen faces. The looks between each other are a bit embarrassing, but more of them are thinking about the future of the world. In the end, do you want to agree to his conditions? Nick frowned. As the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., he has sufficient authority. If that Mr. Li Yi is only targeting those vicious gangsters and criminals, then there may be a real possibility of coexistence between S.H.I.E.L.D. and him. Even if there is a chance, maybe Li Yi can be absorbed into S.H.I.E.L.D. and become one of their new members. I don't think so. Stark frowned and said, his ambition and ideas terrified me. It was a fanatical attitude, wanting to use a whole set of complicated rules to cover the entire world. Such a move was almost impossible to achieve. Wanting to promote its founders are either true pacifists or absolute tyrants. How can you be sure that he is not the former? Hawkeye said, frowning. As for Li Yi's intense exercise in the presidential suite at the moment. Hawkeye, without a doubt the angriest guy in S.H.I.E.L.D. But take a step back. 150 from an objective point of view, he really felt that it was not too much to agree to Li Yi's request. In S.H.I.E.L.D., the task of many members is to combat darkness, punish evil and promote good. Captain Magian nodded immediately and said, Stark, do you still remember the planetary defense plan you mentioned? Don't you think that your plan and this so-called common rule of Mr. Li Yi have a certain meaning? Above, is it the same product? Hearing the captain's question, Stark made no secret of his anger. Pull off your walnut file-size brain and put it under the microscope to have a look. At that time, the super soldier serum that was strengthening you didn't affect your brain. The planetary defense plan is to gather the strength of all people and resist powerful enemies. Invasion. The fundamentals of this plan are not to serve anyone. It's a purely protective measure. The idea of this Mr. Li Yi is to put a terrible shackle on everyone's head. Stark almost growled. However, in response to the question he raised, the expressions of many members were subtle. Everyone fell into deep thought, considering their future choices. This choice is too important for them, and no mistakes are allowed. In the luxurious, CBBD, presidential suite, advertisement. On that warm and spacious custom-made bed, Li Yi threw off a piece of triangular cloth that was drooping around her body. It's a nice feeling, even if it's the same dish. Tasting in different worlds, the beauty that goes deep into the bone marrow seems to have changed a little bit. It's like playing twins at the same time. Although they are similar, they have different microsecond feelings. This gave him a bold idea. If Natasha Romanoff from the two worlds lay on his body together, what would it be like? Li Yi thought he. Natasha Romanoff on the side, lying there soft and boneless. The well-trained body has extraordinary endurance and flexibility. It's a pity that the bright and beautiful flowers still look fragile in front of another much more terrifying humanoid monster. Get up calmly and finish dressing. Throw the bedsheet that fell on the ground back. Li Yi picked up the tequila and rinsed his mouth. Next, there are things to do. Although there was preliminary contact with S.H.I.E.L.D., there was no possibility of any delay in his action plan. His figure quietly disappeared into the presidential suite. A small piece of paper slowly landed on Natasha Romanoff's unconscious blushing cheek. Wonderful sincerity, I hope you will seriously consider my suggestion. After all, we don't want some things that have happened to happen again in this world. In the suburbs of New York, the prisoner of the sun is eerie. Countless criminals were imprisoned here. On the surface, they are villains imprisoned in the prison, but in fact, this prison carries a more important task. In comparison, some petty criminals roam the streets and alleys, cheated and abducted. Certain monsters with astonishing destructive power have broken the human category at certain levels. Also imprisoned here, in the deepest part of the prison, there is a dark and narrow cell. In the past, no sound could be heard from the prison cell at all, as if the entire prison was empty and no criminals were imprisoned here. But only the prison guard who is in charge of meals every day knows what a terrifying monster is imprisoned in this seemingly empty cell. The only ventilation window in the cell was just a small gap through which even mice could get out. The wall is made of a special alloy, which is extremely tough, and its thickness is even rarer than 10 centimeters. To put it bluntly, even if a nuclear bomb exploded in this prison, the astonishing impact would not affect this cell. Time to eat, advertisement in the prison guard's hand, he was carrying a piece of meat weighing 10 kilograms. The bloody raw meat can even see the muscle fibers on it, still beating from time to time. Stand above the cell. The prison guard opened a hidden window, quickly threw the raw meat out of his hand, and then quickly covered it. However, before the huge amounts of raw meat fell to the floor of the cell, a dull bang came from the cell. Boom. The intense vibration made even the prison guards who had just walked away feel a chill in their hearts. At that moment, he clearly felt a tremor from the earth. In the prison cell, there was a monster with a huge figure, like a giant lizard, born of human power. She was waving the sharp claws on her forelimbs, frantically tearing at the pieces of meat in her hands. 10 kilograms of meat, for a normal adult man, is enough to satisfy a month's meat intake, but in the mouth of this lizard-like monster. In just a few seconds, the bloody raw meat quickly disappeared as if being swallowed by a black hole. Are you hungry, lizard man? A calm voice sounded in the lizard man's ears. Calmly, with an inexplicable sense of mystery, roar. Almost instantly, the lizard man's vertical pupils were filled with crazy bloodshot eyes, and the bones all over his body made neat noises. He let out a growl, stretched out his claws and swooped into the air. The thick giant tail behind it is tougher than steel, and a random swing can destroy a fast-moving car. But at this moment, this tail is waving at a crazy speed. In the dark cell, a man's figure slowly walked out, calmly looking at the lizard man who was going mad. I thought, we can talk. Li Yi smiled and stretched out his hand. The next moment, sharp claws that were sharper than a dagger grabbed his palm. Boom. In an instant, there was a muffled sound in the cell. It was like a heavy object was violently smashed to the ground. In a dark space, there was still a smile on Li Yi's face. Before my patience runs out, you'd better get back to your senses. Chapter 125 Lizardman, I am very satisfied with you. Temporary plan, raid the prison. In the dark cell, the huge lizardman's body stiffened and fell to the ground. In the tyrannical pupils, there is a look of fear at this moment. Whether it's a human being or a beast, the perception of danger in his heart stimulates the lizardman's brain all the time, and it tells him all the time that there is this smiling man in front of him. Definitely a terrifying monster. Like a hunter standing at the top of the biological chain, watching the endless prey with cold and cruel eyes, it made him shudder, and it was the first time he had such a feeling. Sorry sir, I apologize for the disrespect just now. A dull voice sounded. The lizardman struggled and got up from the ground. He could feel the sharp pain in his chest. Under that heavy blow just now, the seemingly peaceful man in front of him broke half of his ribs without changing his expression. Just a punch. Very well, it seems that your strong resilience can not only act on the body, but also the brain. Li Yi smiled with satisfaction. It is not terrible to make a mistake, but you must know where you are wrong, actively correct it, and take the initiative to apologize. Obviously, the actions of the lizard man saved his life from closing the gate of hell. I want to talk to you, Mr. Lizardman. I am a humble person, I have a little idea and plan to change the world. Although one person promotes it, the plan can be completed, but it takes a long time. So after some consideration, I decided to invite some suitable companions to join my team. Li Yi said calmly. In this world, he really took a fancy to the small role of Lizardman. Although the power possessed by the Lizardmen is not considered strong, and even their proud hand-to-hand combat ability is vulnerable in the face of Thor, Hulk and other existences, but in line with the concept of equality of all beings, Li Yi is still willing to give the Lizardmen a little chance. And thankfully, the Lizardmen jumped at the chance. I didn't wait for Li Yi to introduce her plans and arrangements in this world. With huge amounts of Lizardman, he knelt down on one knee. The sharp claws buckled on the firm, damp and dark ground. The dull voice seemed to be trembling. I have met the master, and I am willing to fight for your lofty ideals. Advertisement. Li Yi frowned slightly, with a satisfied look on his face. I have to say, your performance is very good. You are by far one of the most satisfying people I have met in this world. Li Yi, who had successfully harvested a right-hand man, stretched out his hand, like tearing a piece of paper, and tore off the alloy wall tens of centimeters thick. Let's go, little lizard, if you want to serve me, you can't stay in this kind of place. Absolute freedom is my reward for offering loyalty to you. Boom. Huge monsters, people stand up. Following Li Yi's footsteps, he slowly walked out of this closely guarded prison. Not long after, the figure of the lizard man caught the attention of the guards in the prison. In an instant, amazing firepower poured in. Don't worry about their farewell gifts, go to the reference room and get a list of all the prisoners in this prison. For Li Yi's orders, the lizard man was like a loyal servant, and generally dispatched quickly. Beast's intuition allows him to always make relatively correct choices at critical moments. Beside him was a man in black with a stern face. It's a sleepy dragon. It wasn't long before the incident alert from the district jail reached S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick's face looked extremely astonished. He slapped the urgently transmitted information on a strange event on the table. What happened? Another mass riot in the prison. Captain Magian came over and was about to pick up the iconic shield and go to the suburban prison. Suppress those damn thugs well, and vent your inner anger by the way. There was no riot in the prison, maybe it did happen at the beginning, but it was quickly quelled. Nick rubbed the corners of his eyes and said helplessly. Remember that Mr. Li Yi who lived in the Hilton Hotel? Before the words fell, a hint of expression appeared on the captain's face. Definitely remember, just now, under the noses of all of us, we lost his trace. The waiter who went to knock on the door of the presidential suite only saw Natasha Romanoff fainted from exhaustion. Advertisement. Nick frowned, and he tapped the information on the table. According to the exact information in video, that Mr. Li Yi appeared in the prison in the suburbs, and liberated the arrested lizardmen in the prison. Asking for flowers. Lizardman? The mad scientist who developed the lizard regeneration serum? The captain has some impressions in his mind. He has read related reports in newspapers. That Mr. Li Yi, together with the Lizardman, gathered all the prisoners in the entire prison together. You're saying he raided a prison in suburban New York with plans to release all the prisoners? The captain frowned and said, the hand holding the shield became more and more tense, and the blue veins on the claypot-sized fist protruded like a small snake. He knows that if this is the case, then what this Mr. Li Yi said when he communicated with Natasha Romanoff will be greatly reduced. It can be said that he can no longer be trusted. Regarding the captain's guess, Nick weakly shook his head. No, he's not like that. Oh, he just asked the Lizardman to bring together some of the most heinous people in the prison who were sentenced to death. As for those prisoners who committed minor crimes or did not deserve to die, after being warned by him, they were re-imprisoned back to their cells. That Mr. Li Yi probably took more than 100 people from the suburban prison. They're all prisoners on death row. And he also specifically explained to the police system in the prison and asked them to send a message to S.H.I.E.L.D. He can guarantee in his own name that the more than 100 condemned prisoners he took away will never appear in the world again and do things that endanger society. He will bring them to the right place, let them spend their spare time in their lives, and contribute their part to building a unified and fair order in this world. How can we believe such nonsense? It is too outrageous. The captain frowned, looking hesitant. How did that Mr. Li Yi behave after he left the prison? What is his route? I'm going to meet him and have a good talk with him. At this moment, the captain decided to bow Nangong. However, Nick, who was sitting on the seat, shook his head calmly, regretfully. 3 minutes after Mr. Li Yi left the prison with more than 100 death row inmates, a large number of support troops arrived, but they searched for every plant and tree within 5 kilometers outside the suburban prison. There is no trace of Li Yi, the more than 100 executed prisoners, and the lizard people. It seems that this group of people has evaporated from this world. At Chapter 126, Impatient God, Savior, come from the darkness. Edwards Private Hospital. One stands on the side of New York, among the not-so-famous private hospitals. Sandman, who is tall and strong, now has an honest look, sitting anxiously on a chair outside the ward. Perhaps the self who has had a strange experience has become so powerful that he can transform into flying sand, act recklessly, and make all kinds of extraordinary deeds that ordinary people cannot accomplish. But in front of his daughter, Sandman will always be that kind and honest father. He didn't even want to put any trace of his violent temper in front of his daughter. A doctor in white with a grim expression came out of the ward, with a few ghostly characters scrawled on the medical record in his hand. As he passed Sandman, the anxious man stood up again. Doctor, how is my baby? Regarding Sandman's question, the doctor's eyes flashed with 82 scrutiny. He looked at the man in front of him. Although he was tall and strong, the clothes on his body were of miscellaneous brands whose logos could not be seen clearly. Even from the corners of the clothes and other places, traces of dust could be clearly seen. Obviously the man standing in front of him. Just a worker moving bricks on a construction site or an ordinary driver driving a truck. No matter what the identity of the other party is. With such a career choice, he is doomed to be a poor man who can't make much money. I'm sorry, we have tried our best, but your daughter's body is too weak. Even after the operation, the current situation is still a bit dangerous. The doctor said slowly, thinking about what to say next. Why, my baby is still in danger. You're the best private hospital. All the equipment and medical technology are top-notch. I have already paid for the operation fee. Why can't she be cured? Sandman yelled a little out of composure. His pupils were bigger than a copper bell. He really couldn't accept his daughter's serious illness. That cute little angel-like child was lying on the hospital bed dying and sobbing. Every tear she shed was a heavy hammer to attack the father's heart. Sir, please don't get me wrong, the previous bill is just an upfront fee, and more money is needed for surgery and subsequent physical therapy. Hearing that this rustic-looking man in front of him had already paid the surgery fee in full. A trace of unknown cunning flashed in the doctor's eyes, as if he seemed to have misjudged this time. This man may still have a lot of savings in his hand. Advertisement that being the case, you have to think of a way to empty him out. As for the life and death of a little girl on the hospital bed, the doctor didn't take it seriously. What he didn't tell Sandman was that the little girl who was about to undergo surgery in the operating room had already deteriorated seriously, and the chance of surviving even after being sent to the operating table was less than 10%. In other words, the upcoming surgery, it's just a faithful little girl's death journey to heaven. The anxious Sandman once again listened to the doctor's words. He endured the restlessness in his heart, and sat with his head down in the aisle with the traces of crazy will emerging constantly. The sand under his feet swirled, rubbed, and collided gently. After half an hour of surgery, the doctor in charge of the operation took off the towel handed over by the plump nurse and wiped away the sweat that didn't exist on his forehead. He sighed, and with a calm face, he covered the child's face with a large white cloth. Oh, sorry, sir, we have used all our strength and used all the top equipment in the hospital, but unfortunately, God seems to be anxious to see this lovely little baby. Walking out of the operating room, the doctor showed a helpless and regretful expression to Sandman. Sandman, who was still looking forward to it, suddenly froze. The next moment, when he saw the cart covered with white cloth slowly pushed out of the operating room, his whole body trembled even more. What? Unable to bear it any longer, Sandman uttered a mournful howl, like endless sorrow, vented from the father's chest. Sir, please calm down. I can empathize with you and understand your sadness, but unfortunately we really did our best. The doctor calmly recited the speech he had already prepared, and took a bill that had been arranged from the nurse while speaking. It's a pity, but sir, please sign this treatment reimbursement form for follow-up expenses. The doctor handed over the reimbursement form. A pair of palms that spilled endless gravel caught the reimbursement form. The next moment, in the corridor of Edwards Private Hospital, endless gravel spewed out suddenly. Like a torrent, crazily surging. A sudden sandstorm swept across New York in an instant. Horrific natural disasters have wreaked havoc. Advertisement. Edwards Private Hospital became the biggest victim of the dust storm whose cause is unknown. The entire hospital collapsed under the blowing of the sandstorm. Not long after, information related to this strange incident reached S.H.I.E.L.D. Director Nick's desk again. Little Pete, what do you think? Nick scratched his bald head and handed over the information in his hand to the Spider-Man who just came over to check the situation. Edwards Hospital. Sandstorm. As a superhero who just fought against Sandman not long ago, Spider-Man has an extraordinary sensitivity to sandstorms, carefully flipping through the information in his hand. Little Spider-Man's vision instantly locked on one of the blurry street photos. It's this man. This storm is not a natural disaster, it's man-made. This man is the culprit. Spider-Man pointed out the existence of Sandman without any hesitation. I have fought against him. This person has a strange ability and can control the sand. Nick looked at the figure Spider-Man pointed out. He rubbed the space between his brows and then said, since that's the case, I'll leave this small matter to you, Spider-Man. Now most of the power of the entire S.H.I.E.L.D., including Director Nick, is focused on Li Yi. To deal with a superhuman who is doing evil in the city, sending Spider-Man to deal with 3.6 is more than enough. No problem, I'll take care of it. Spider-Man patted his chest and said relaxedly. Having experienced the last confrontation, he has clearly figured out Sandman's weakness of being afraid of water. The next time you meet, you only need to capture the weak point. That supervillain is destined to be unable to escape from his own spiderweb. In the suburbs of New York, in a slum with few people, Sandman sat in the carriage in a daze, holding the pale child in his arms who had lost all signs of life. For a father, this is unspeakable pain. The next moment, the sound of calm footsteps sounded slowly, accompanied by a dull sound. The earth trembled, as if a giant was approaching. Sandman raised his head vigilantly, his scarlet eyes were filled with tears, and at the same time, there was a tyrannical killing intent. Chapter 127 Spider-Man feels that trouble seems to be bigger. Take it easy, Sandman. The figure of Li Yi stepped out of the darkness, with a personable and extraordinary appearance, like an elegant and calm gentleman, but behind him was a huge and violent reptile creature. The turbulent quicksand, surging beside Sandman, represents the strange anger in this man's heart. When his daughter was alive, he still had the rationality of human nature, which restrained his behavior. But when that extremely cute little angel, far away from me, Sandman's heart is going to break. At the moment, an uncontrollable violent tendency surged in his heart, wanting to destroy everything he saw, even in front of Li Yi, whom he once obeyed. If I were you, I wouldn't do this, Li Yi said calmly, pointing at the little girl in Sandman's arms whose body was getting colder. Although the hospital may not be able to save her, in my eyes, the boundary between life and death is not so clear. Hearing Li Yi's subtext Sandman, he was slightly taken aback. In the heart of complete despair, ecstasy emerged. That's right, the man in front of 21 has great strength, and he must be better than himself. He looked at the man in front of him, and stretched out his hand as if to grasp the last straw. Save her. Save my daughter. Whatever you want, I can help you. Who do you want to kill and what are you going to do? Robbing a bank or a prison? I can open the vault of the capital for you, Sandman roared a little crazily, feeling extremely excited inside. The violent quicksand is crazy in the car. Seeing that Sandman was extremely crazy, he couldn't even control his emotions. Li Yi smiled and responded calmly. Definitely yes, but not now, although I do have the ability to revive her, but before resuscitating this little girl, I need to complete some rules first. Hearing Li Yi's words, the four of them were slightly taken aback. The eyes that had finally calmed down seemed to start to surge with bloody and violent breath again. He hates being lied to. This has happened many times. Those damn hospitals, Doc. It's money, money, money all day long, nothing else works. No matter how expensive medical expenses I pay, I can't save my baby from the serious illness. And the man in front of me at this moment seems to be using such tricks again. Advertisement. He felt angry, surprisingly angry. You think I'm easy to cheat, don't you? Why do you make me believe your nonsense? While speaking, Sandman's gigantic arm has spread out, turning into a giant hand of sand tens of meters, as if it would crush the man in front of him to death at any time. A whizzing sandstorm emerged from the slums, causing countless people to scream in panic. Crowds of people rushed out, like one after another panicking cockroaches, rushing out of this dirty slum. Among the low shanty houses, there was a figure walking against the crowd. The iconic spider battlesuit looked stunning. However, before Spider-Man arrived, there was a dull sound from a somewhat dilapidated large truck. Look at the Sandman who was about to run away at any time. Li Yi frowned, a little regretful. It seems that there are not many people like lizardmen in this world. Mr. Sandman, I hope you understand that in this situation, the only person who can help you is me, and you can only choose to trust me. If you are so frank, you won't be satisfied, then I can only regretfully announce the end of this failed recruitment. I hope those superheroes can help you rescue your daughter from heaven. Hey guy. Haven't seen you for a long time. The voice of Spider-Man came from outside the truck, and the tough cobweb sprayed over, directly locking the cabin. The huge force disintegrated the truck in an instant. Boom. The scene inside the big truck appeared in front of Spider-Man. Looking at the several figures that appeared out of thin air, the expression under the spider mask instantly wrinkled together. Damn it, when Commissioner Nick greeted me, he didn't say there would be so many people here, W. Beside the man who could control the sand, a huge lizard-like monster was waving its thick tail and staring at him angrily. For Spider-Man, this is also an old acquaintance. Lizard Man. After all, he was the one who sent him to the New York prison with his own hands. Standing beside the Lizard Man was a handsome man with a hint of cold temperament, who seemed to have a profound charm. Advertisement. Although from the appearance point of view, this man is the most normal of the three. But thinking of the face he had just seen, Spider-Man couldn't help covering his forehead. My God, Mr. Li Yi, why are you here? Compared to Sandman and Lizardman, this Mr. Li Yi is the real big trouble. Nothing comes out, just walk around. Li Yi responded calmly. Looking at the angry Sandman beside him, he took advantage of the situation and said, It just so happens that Spider-Man is also here. You can also ask him if there is any technique that can bring your daughter back from the dead. Sandman's eyes fell to Spider-Man. Back from the dead? The superhero wearing a hood scratched his head helplessly. He also saw the delicate girl in Sandman's arms. Sensitive spider vision allowed him to be sure the child had been dead for some time. When everything is a foregone conclusion, it has become impossible to resurrect this child again. Unless some supernatural power is being used. In New York 640, the use of supernatural powers to turn death into life often causes unnecessary trouble and conflicts. Spider-Man spread his hands helplessly and regretfully said, "Sir, I feel sorry for your current situation, but there is really no way. From the current basic scientific point of view, we cannot bring dead man back to life." After a long silence, the sand on Sandman's body slowly subsided. The next moment he finally looked up at Li Yi. In the gloomy and melancholy pupils, there was a trace of bewilderment and determination. This is the last time I will trust anyone. If I fulfill your request, but you cannot bring my daughter back to life, I promise, I will bury your body in the sand. Facing Sandman's warning and threat, Li Yi smiled lightly. It doesn't have to be like this, life. Though to be honest, you can't bury me in the sand. But I have enough confidence and certainty. If I do what I say, the rules of the whole world will change. Turning death into life is no longer a miracle, and your daughter can come back to the world to see you. Whether you go to heaven or fall into the hands of Death God, I will take it back for you. Not far away, Spider-Man rubbed his head in frustration. The sudden situation made him feel extremely troublesome. The number of his own opponents seems to be a bit huge. Chapter 128. Come and meet an old friend, Mr. Jin Bing. Sorry, really sorry, this gentleman, although I also sympathize with your current situation. But now you are suspected of causing a man-made sandstorm disaster, which caused the destruction of Edward's hospital. At the request of S.H.I.E.L.D., I have to take you away. Spider-Man said something slowly, and then slowly crouched down. This is his standard fighting stance. Between the words, his spider vision has already been raised to the extreme. Seeing Spider-Man's businesslike appearance, Li Yi spread his hands calmly. "Two guys, it's time to show me your strength. I believe that partners who are willing to cooperate with me must have superior abilities." Before the words fell, the lizard man had already risen into the air, and his huge body rushed over. "Meet old friends. It's time to put an end to old grudges and grudges." The irritable lizard man rushed directly to the low roof of the slums, and his huge body instantly knocked off pieces of iron sheets. Although it looks petite in size, Spider-Man not only has extremely agile speed, but also has extraordinary strength. At least in S.H.I.E.L.D., he is also a very high-ranking existence. Boom! In a blink of an eye, this slum area has become a battlefield. Overwhelming pots and pans, sheets and bedding, and even some clothes that are not suitable for children, were thrown everywhere. The thick-skinned lizard men are not even attacking the Spider-Man at all. He was like a crazy wild dog, constantly biting that resentful figure. Sandman followed closely behind, and the flying quicksand could not only be used as an offensive weapon. In terms of interference and raids, it also has a very good effect. A stream of sand that quietly condensed came suddenly from behind, wrapping towards Spider-Man. Although through the susceptive perception of spider vision, you can avoid it instantly. However, Spider-Man's ankle was still tightly grasped by the huge palm that had been turned into sand. "You can't get away, little reptile." There was a sneer on Sandman's face. Only in battle can he temporarily avoid the sorrow and pain from his heart. Boom! Sandman waved huge amounts of palms, repeatedly slapping the ground. The Spider-Man held in the palm of his hand, thus withstood the shock. Although he was not seriously injured, under this unimaginably frantic beating, he was stronger than Spider-Man and he quickly lost consciousness. Advertisement watching the lizard man walk past. It seems that he wants to tear this superhero who put himself in prison to pieces. Li Yi raised his hand to stop it. Enough, our conflict with S.H.I.E.L.D. is not that deep at the moment. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, I do not recommend this. Li Yi's words have a strong restraining effect on the lizard men. After he spoke, this huge amounts of monster reluctantly gave up his own ideas. Moments later, a large number of New York Special Police arrived and quickly surrounded the almost half-destroyed slum. Regrettably, the instigator of this astonishing destruction has long since left. There was only one comatose man who had been stripped naked and only had a spider hood left. He was hoisted with a cobweb and hung on a tree with a crooked neck. Li Yi, who left the slums and took over his second subordinate at the same time, was in a good mood. Walking on the empty street, Sandman, who regained his human form, followed in silence. There was a slight tremor under his feet. In order to avoid the appearance of the public and cause a sensation on the street, the lizard man had to choose a dark and damp sewer to pass through. But for him, it seems that the environment of the sewer is more suitable. Walked to a familiar magnificent building, Li Yi stopped in her tracks. Outside the gate of the building stood a row of well-trained muscular men in black suits. In the streets not far away, there are many street people dressed in fancy clothes but with bulging pockets talking and laughing unscrupulously. Although the surrounding environment seemed safe, Li Yi could feel it very clearly. Quietly, there are already countless pairs of eyes staring at him. Even on several tall buildings far apart, the muzzles of several sniper rifles were aimed at his head. Familiar old place. It seems that I can see an old friend. Li Yi smiled. He walked over calmly. The security personnel guarding the company quickly surrounded them, wanting to expel them, but they were pinned to the ground by the deserted hands that suddenly appeared. "Mr. Jin Bin, your old friend from a foreign land wants to meet you." Li Yi said swaggeringly, opened the door calmly, and entered the interior of the building. Outside the majestic church-like building, there is a huge billboard with bright neon lights. Advertisement Gold & Company. Walking into the interior of the building, the lights are shining, as if the air smells of money. A team of well-trained professional thugs had already been waiting there. A piece of high-definition projection equipment that had been prepared was turned on at the right time, revealing a burly man who seemed to be fat, but was actually extremely revealing. Mr. Li Yi, I must have heard correctly, right? Shouldn't you be fighting wits with shield now? Why did you come to my place? Jin Bing said in a low voice, his tone was full of strength and confidence. As the Underworld Emperor of New York, he controls the huge underground world. Although he knows that the man may have some special abilities, but for Jin Bing, this does not pose a threat. It's not like I haven't killed a powerful superhuman being before. Seeing the way the Underworld Emperor talked to himself through the video projection, Li Yi frowned. Sorry, but I think face-to-face is more appropriate for real communication. While talking, Li Yi raised his head and looked at this magnificent palace. Almost in an instant, his eyes fixed on a certain direction. At that moment, despite being separated by dozens of layers of thick walls, dull sound accompanied by violent shaking, at the same time, raging sand is also surging in this closed indoor space. Can see me, witnessed a scene of almost crazy destruction. Mr. Li Yi, you have already proved your qualifications to talk to me. Jin Bing's face did not show any joy or anger, but a touch of appreciation. I'm all ears. Next, what do you want to say? I have to say that this kind of psychological quality is still hard enough. A monster with huge amounts of lizardman broke out from under the ground, of Hao Nuo. Without the slightest sense of guilt for smashing and destroying the master's house, Li Yi said disapprovingly, and looked at the underworld overlord in front of him calmly. Jin Bing could still feel that the man who suddenly broke into his territory seemed to have seen him. The bloated body wrapped under the suit leaned forward slightly, like a big frog that could pounce out at any moment. Now we can talk, Mr. Kimbin, Jin Bing said slowly, and slowly sat up straight. Li Yi stepped over a violently smashed wall and sat in front of Jin Bing with a calm face. Boom. Just a minute later. Chapter 129. The negotiation is over, the deal with the Underground Emperor. Visit the central vault. In the dark and narrow space, Jin Bin has a huge body, like a pedestrian tank. His burly and bloated body can even be compared with a lizard man. Under the thick suit, the raised skin can be clearly seen. This is not the fat accumulated by being pampered. It is a truly powerful solid muscle that breaks through the dimension of human beings going online. To be honest, Mr. Jin Bin, I have not only met you, but also dealt with you many times. With a smile on Li Yi's face, he tapped on the desk in front of him. I am a person who hates trouble, so I came to you today, hoping to reach a long-term and stable cooperation with you. I need you to provide me with some men. Who and how many people? Jin Bing's face is also full of smiles, his seemingly fat and round face, the muscles on both sides of his cheeks are exaggeratedly curved, like a joker performing in a circus. But the people who once had this idea have now been stuffed into the shark's mouth by Jin He himself. I know you should control a lot of contacts, for example, some gangsters squatting on the street doing nothing, drug addicts hiding in the corner, and some elite murderers. Li Yi said calmly. I need all these people. Call them 523 and give them to me. My initial plan is to gather 10,000 people. Definitely, now you need to help me find about 9,900 people. Hearing Li Yi's request, the smile on his face became even more exaggerated. Drug addicts, gangsters, murderous thugs. Those people are the objects of his trade, the eyes and ears he deliberately cultivated, his loyal subordinates, and the means by which he, the underworld overlord in New York, controls the entire underground world. Give all these people to the man in front of you? Jin Bin's eyes were tightly wrapped by thick eyelids, with only a slit exposed, making it difficult to pry into his eyes. You want to take over my underground world? He said softly. The suit seemed to be stretched even tighter, and the sound of fine silk being violently broken could be heard vaguely. It seems that the next moment, a humanoid beast will be released from the suit. Even if there are two big guys who look good behind the opponent, it doesn't mean that they can replace themselves. Oh, Jin Bin, you misunderstood. All I want are people, just those scum who have lost their reason to live because of their sins. Advertisement, I don't care about your underground world, and the money and power you think you have. Even if you want, I can use these things as bargaining chips. Li Yi spoke calmly, looking at the mafia overlord in front of him who was about to run away at any time. He patiently explained to the other party that because of the other party's weakness, identity and strength, everything is up to you. The cavity is a minister. There is no fear that Kim will suddenly attack himself. And if it wasn't for his Black Shadow Core being suppressed by this world, he didn't need to say so much at all, just let the Black Shadow Core do it until he was convinced. Before I came to see you, I already went to the prison, but the effect made me very dissatisfied. In addition to harvesting one right-hand man, there are only about 100 people who are really guilty in that prison. According to such a slow collection efficiency, if I want to find enough personnel, I have to travel to at least more than 100 prisons. Therefore, after thinking about it, I think Mr. Jin Bing can provide the goods I need better here. Goods? What do you want them for? A look of confusion flashed across Jin Bing's eyes. Not long ago, he also heard about the large-scale riots in the suburban prisons of New York. A lunatic who came from nowhere. Just like that, he walked into the prison grandly and robbed more than 100 death row prisoners and serious prisoners. You did it. What do you want to call so many people? Build an army of thugs and fight against S.H.I.E.L.D., or go to an untouched desert area and build a dark kingdom of your own? Questions about Jin Bing. Li Yi smiled easily. I do have the idea of forming a kingdom, but the prisoners I took away are not subjects of the kingdom. They don't have the qualifications yet. Being CBAI, as part of 10,000 people, they are the cornerstones of my kingdom, like the bottom stone bricks on the pyramids. Unable to figure out Li Yi's consciousness, Jin did not express his opinion immediately. He pondered for a while and opened his eyes again. A cunning light was reflected in the vicious pupils. I can agree to this deal, but a person, a gold brick, must be the gold curry of the Central Bank of New York, the purest kind. Li Yi nodded disapprovingly, seeing Jin Bing's skyrocketing price. Long-lost old friend, you are still so greedy and cunning. Go and gather your people. Now I'm going to withdraw the money. I hope that when I come back with the gold nuggets, you have gathered enough of the people I need. Advertisement. Li Yi stood up slowly, turned and left. Looking at his back as he walked slowly, Jin Bing's gaze instantly became extremely gloomy. Looking at the dilapidated appearance of the Jinbin building being destroyed, the master's heart was always suppressed with anger. Li Yi, Jin Bin gritted his teeth and said with love. After walking out of the building, Li Yi didn't stay any longer, and directly led the Lizard Man and Sandman through the dark space to the vault of the Central Bank of New York. To his surprise, the Central Bank of New York is impressively established near the center of New York, and its location is extremely prosperous. And there are densely packed cameras all around, like stars, watching every corner. Now, it's hard to do. Looks like it's going to cause a little commotion. Li Yi frowned. Lizard Man, release your free nature, I want to see a wonderful performance here. But remember, when you can control the situation, try not to hurt those innocent people. Although, Li Yi doesn't really care about the life and death of those innocent people. However, before establishing a real order, some necessary bright images still have to be maintained. For the sacrifice of the dragon, it takes a lot of effort to prepare 10,000 sacrifices. Li Yi thought to himself and began to consider the next plan. Seeing the giant lizard roaring wildly out of the ground, the surrounding crowd quickly screamed and then fled like a tide. In the face of unknown fear, people's reactions are often the most authentic. There are no real brave men in the world, and even if there are very few. It's a pity that it's hard to find pure and good people who are really kind-hearted, and I don't have that much effort to explore their hearts one by one. Li Yi sighed, a little regretful. It is also a sacrifice of 10,000 people, but the type and character of these 10,000 people will also have a subtle impact on the sacrifice of the dragon. Compared with 10,000 ordinary people and the heinous 10,000 criminals, the sacrificial energy provided by the latter is undoubtedly more and more evil. Definitely the best means of sacrifice is to find 10,000 good people who are pure in mind and extremely kind. The most dazzling light, when it falls into darkness, is also the most corrupted. Chapter 130 Warm-up exercise before formal negotiation. I just want to work overtime. In a blink of an eye, the street was emptied. The roaring giant lizard was carrying a minibus and swung it like a meteor hammer, smashing the lampposts on the roadside one by one. For Beast, aggressive behavior is the release of his own nature, and it is also a necessary exercise to maintain his wild state. Seeing that the lizard man still wants to continue to work hard to destroy, Li Yi pointed to the heavily guarded central bank. Dude, don't forget the main task this time. The next moment, the berserk beast rushed directly into the central bank with an extremely crazy attitude. The solid walls are completely unable to withstand the brutal collision of the lizardmen. In a blink of an eye, a huge amount of hole appeared. Li Yi walked over calmly, followed the path the lizardman rushed out, and went directly into the depths of the central bank, looking for the underground vault with a huge combination lock. Sandman made a move, and the huge deserted arm directly clasped the combination lock outside the vault and tore it off abruptly. Golden light shines from inside. One piece after another, extremely high-purity gold bricks were neatly stacked there. Li Yi looked at the gold brick in front of him and nodded in satisfaction. According to the sufficient amount of 1 kilogram of a gold brick, the underground gold curry of the Central Bank of New York has at least 10 tons of gold in reserve. This also means that he has more than 10,000 gold bricks to start with. Forget it, the extra point, let's treat it as a gift from Mr. Jin Bing. After all, I have always been a wealthy and generous person. Li Yi asked the lizardman to pack up enough gold bricks, and was about to turn around and return to the Jinbin building. However, when he walked out of the shattered bank building, one figure after another slowly descended in front of him. Falcon, who was dressed in mechanical armor, stared at Li Yi with a solemn expression. Sir, in the heart of New York, for this blatant robbery of state property. Is there something wrong? Li Yi spread his hands, then what are you going to do? I'm sorry, we can't let you behave like this, Falcon said in a low voice. The miniature missile sight on his body had already locked on the opponent in front of him. Beside him at this moment, there is also a huge monster with greenery and bulging muscles. Dr. Bruce in gamma form. He had already lost his original gentle and refined temperament, and exuded a terrifying aura called anger all over his body. The captain walked over slowly, the shield in his hand was shining brightly under the sun. Mr. Li Yi, we agreed that Natasha Romanoff will negotiate with you on behalf of S.H.I.E.L.D. and fulfill your appropriate request. But your current behavior has clearly violated the red line of the law. Advertisement looking at the superhero who quickly gathered in front of him. Li Yi scratched his head in distress. Sorry, Tour. I have given you a chance, and I hope to reach an effective cooperation with you. However, in order to ensure the completion of the plan, I have to work overtime by myself, isn't it allowed? Roar. Before Li Yi finished speaking, The green gamma monster that couldn't stand it rushed forward, and the huge titan quickly fought with the lizard man. This is pure muscle confrontation, full of shock. The wide road has become a battlefield for beast confrontation. Car after car became toys that they threw at each other at will. The battle had already broken out, and the miniature missiles on Falcon's body shot out in an instant. Among them were the assault missiles with medium fire suppression, which also carried specially made powerful anesthetics. As long as it can stick to that man's body, even a whale can fall into a coma within seconds. Then, the dust rising from the sky destroyed all the miniature missiles released by Falcon in the blink of an eye. Behind Li Yi, Sandman's body slowly dispersed. The ground shook, and an extremely tall Sandman with a height of more than 10 meters appeared on the street in the city center. Damn it! The captain gritted his teeth and rushed over, wanting to fight these criminals released by Li Yi. A pair of calm hands stopped in front of him. As a respect to you, Captain, your opponent is me. Li Yi said calmly. Boom! The next moment, the figure of the man wearing the Stars and Stripes battlesuit and holding the shield turned into a shooting star and flew upside down. It crashed into the wall of a building. Wow! A large expanse of glass was shattered. That figure crashed directly into the building, causing many innocent people to scream. Li Yi stood on the spot, moving his wrist lightly. I'm sorry, Mr. Captain, I haven't adapted to you in this world yet. It seems to be a little different from the other you I met before. I used too much strength. If there is any damage, I am really sorry. Advertisement. Asking for flowers. Zero. Li Yi apologized solemnly. If in another world, these so-called heroes would not be treated so well, they would die if they deserved it. But now he just wanted something different. It also fits his personality in this world. Hoo-hoo. Soon, in the billowing smoke and dust, that steadfast figure reappeared, but at the moment the star-striped clothes he was wearing, which was typical, were already torn, and a trace of blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. But those eyes full of wisdom are still firm. Holding the vibranium shield in his hand, the captain gritted his teeth and looked at the calm man standing in front of the vault. This opponent was unexpectedly strong. It does fit the profile described earlier by the Ancient One magician when he warned the shield crowd. This is a demon capable of destroying the world. 0, 0. On the surface, they seem to be smiling, but in fact they make them shout ma ma pie. Now, even the captain, who represents the incarnation of justice in the world, still has no fear of fighting. He is one of the few brave men. The angry roar and roar of the monster is like a fierce symphony. Standing among the ruins, Li Yi smiled calmly and calmly. A white man with a metal arm, he is walking quietly. Fireworks everywhere. On the indestructible vibranium shield, leave a clear fist mark. Although the time is tight, no corresponding counter-armor can be made, but many mark models have been activated. At the same time, in another direction, a swift figure, like a leopard, jumped from many tall buildings and launched a surprise attack on Li Yi. If you can't find a breakthrough in performance, you can only strive for an advantage through quantitative crushing. Stark, looking at the man who was fighting with some superheroes at the door of the vault. Before he finished speaking, he punched again and sent the captain flying in front of him with one punch. It seems that warm-up activities are also necessary before the real negotiation results are achieved. The captain said softly, and rushed out again. Swallowing the blood in his throat, he clenched his teeth. Above the sky, there is also a mechanical figure in red gold armor. Under the acceleration of the rocket propulsion, he rushed here quickly, and behind him followed 10 different types of steel armor. The overwhelming steel battle armor is coming at a gallop. He said solemnly, I could hang out with you all day. Chapter 131. Stark, were all your previous opponents fools? Rumble. Immediately. Intense artillery fire, accompanied by billowing smoke and dust. There was an astonishing aura in the air, like the state of countless beasts after a melee. The lizard man and the green-skinned titan are still deeply involved in the endless hand-to-hand combat. This is the first time he has ever encountered an existence that can truly compete with him in terms of hand-to-hand combat ability. Even with the fierce confrontation, even the lizard man felt that the green titan he was facing seemed to be getting more and more angry. The power that burst out became infinite, even he is feeling the pressure. At the same time, Sandman, who turned into quicksand, also encountered a lot of trouble. Even though he has been transformed into sand, he is enough to float in the void, facing the siege of many opponents, he can dodge calmly. The countless tiny missiles released by Falcon were unable to cause substantial damage to Sandman at all. But with the arrival of Stark, the chaotic, 950, battle situation was quickly reversed. Little Spider-Man told me that this Sandman's weakness is water. Stark spoke calmly, and then mobilized the other steel armors to release the clear water. The simple running water quickly condensed Sandman's body, making it impossible for him to retain the ability to move freely. Boom! Following closely behind, Winter Soldier rushed over and punched Sandman in the chest. He punched this burly man flying. The battle is one-sided. But on the other side, it presents a different situation. Originally, he was thinking of going one-on-one with Li Yi and entangled this terrifying opponent, but now he was unconscious in the pile of rubble, dying. Although it will not be a sudden death on the spot. But judging from his twisted arm, the captain obviously suffered unimaginable heavy injuries. Together with the vibranium shield that had been with him for decades, it was also bent into an astonishing arc at this moment, like a twisted coin, thrown aside at will. A figure as agile as Black Panther is struggling to write seasons to contend. The Panther God is on top. Black Panther from Wakanda is trying to deal with Li Yi, relying on its own high-tech battlesuit and matching the power of the Panther God. He unleashed his potential again and again, reluctantly bearing the man's calm punching. The power contained in the seemingly unpretentious fist is too huge, extremely terrifying, and incomparably astonishing. He watched this man with his own eyes, smashing the captain's arm into fractures with one punch. Then, together with that piece of vibranium shield, they were instantly distorted. "I hate noisy bugs." Advertisement Li Yi frowned and said, his figure disappeared instantly. Next moment, the artillery fire of several steel battle armors instantly covered the place where he stood just now. These different types of steel battle armor brought by Stark are the biggest shit-stirring sticks on the battlefield. Sandman is suppressed. Under the attacks of many enemies, they retreated steadily. If it is not the last moment, forced desertification. Maybe the tiny missiles fired by the Falcon can completely smash him to pieces. The situation of the lizard people is also tragic. In the confrontation with the Green Titan, he has clearly fallen behind. What's more, there are several steel armors supporting and constantly interfering. Although the small-scale gunfire attack couldn't cause real damage to the lizard man, it could effectively divert his attention, causing him to be caught by the big Green Titan and punch him several times. Dizzy. Very well, you managed to arouse my interest. Inflicting such inhumane brutality on a teammate I just recruited. This is my answer to you. Li Yi's voice sounded faintly. All the superheroes present felt the chills. Boom. A steel battle armor that stayed in midair, looked down on the battlefield, and looked at the whole situation, exploded in an instant. He was smashed into scrap iron by a fist protruding out of thin air. "You are the first, Mr. Iron Man. No, I should call you Stark." When Li Yi's voice echoed in Stark's ears, the Iron Man of World 2 felt a bad omen. Sure enough, in the next few seconds, the nightmare came. One steel battle armor after another was quickly scrapped under the man's terrifying fists. Rare materials worth tens of millions were completely unable to resist that man's fist. Almost in the blink of an eye, Iron Man's armor was completely destroyed by Li Yi. Until the end, the only remaining red-gold battle armor stayed on the ruins, surrounded by superheroes. This is Stark's armor, and it's the last one. If that man still wants to continue to attack him, he will definitely be counterattacked by many superheroes present. I have to say that your protection of him seems to be perfect, but it is actually full of loopholes. Advertisement Li Yi's voice sounded faintly. The next moment, the man in black with a stern face came out of the void. Grabbing Stark by the throat, strong hands around Stark's throat. With the other hand, he tore off the mechanical headgear covering the playboy's face. "It's useless, it looks gimmicky. Throw the steel mask under your feet, and step on it into scrap iron." Looking at Stark who was still trying to struggle, Li Yi bent his fingers and lightly flicked the energy source that released the blue light. "Know it, Stark. Among all the superheroes, your weakness is so obvious. I wondered for a while, are all the opponents you have experienced are fools? Keep your energy cores in good condition, and still have various confrontations with you." Accompanied by Li Yi's light tap. Fine cracks have already appeared on the reactor on Stark's chest, and the micro-reactor restrained on his chest will shatter at any moment, releasing a world-shattering energy. That was a terrible explosion powerful enough to blow up an entire city. In any case, Stark, who is at the center of the explosion, will turn into gas and disappear from the world the moment the reactor shatters. Slowly put down the caught-off-guard Stark. Boom. Li Yi looked back at those superheroes. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, the other superheroes saw that Li Yi had easily controlled Stark, and immediately threw their hands at him. No one dared to attack this man again under such a dangerous 3.1 situation. "Since the dog I brought has been eaten by your hands." After forcefully taking Li Yi's punch, not only could he not die, but he grinned and endured the severe pain. After easily disposing of the troublesome Stark, as their master, definitely want to get this place back. I hope you will remain stable and stop acting rashly, otherwise I will not be responsible for the result of an energy core bursting. That's it, Stark, but they won't. The fight continues. No way, their physical fitness is generally good. Seeing him freeze on the spot, not daring to move, Li Yi smiled. Stretching out his hand and beckoning forward, he said nonchalantly, "Go on, heroes. If you were an ordinary person, you might die with one punch." Li Yi's domineering fist is a terrifying threat to these superheroes. However, for those superheroes, this is not even a battle, it is purely a one-sided massacre. Chapter 132 Friends shaking hands, the dragon ceremony is about to be completed. On the dilapidated street, Li Yi's lonely figure stood there, like a demon king standing in the dark, and there were wailing and unconscious superheroes everywhere under his feet. King Black Panther from Wakanda has been hung from a street tree. The high-tech battlesuit on his body was completely broken. Even the heart-shaped gemstone on the chest was crushed into powder by G in a fierce collision. Squeeze the steel arm belonging to Winter Soldier into an oval iron ball. Li Yi threw it out leisurely. Boom. The iron ball hit the unconscious Dr. Bruce on the head. Effective hit, nice. Li Yi smiled with satisfaction. At this moment, Sandman and the Lizard Man stood behind him, their expressions full of awe. Just now they witnessed the overwhelming victory with their own eyes. This man was raging like a Mephisto, and he pinned the so-called superhero to the ground in an instant. Prior to this, both Sandman and Lizard Man had personally confronted these superheroes many times. They are well aware of the power of these superheroes. But in front of their masters, the heroic image in the impression seems to be completely subverted. Take the gold nuggets and let's go. Li Yi smiled and brought the people back to Jin Merge Company. Outside the luxurious tall office building, a group of workers are repairing it non-stop. Looking at the figure that was walking slowly, everyone exclaimed and fled in all directions. Without anyone else walking into the depths of the building, he looked at the underground emperor with a slightly astonished expression. Jin Bin, what you want? I have already come, Li Yi said calmly. A huge amounts of package was dragged out of the dark space by him. Wow, the golden color was reflected on Jin Bing's face in an instant. It was a piece of heavy pure gold. Each piece is a full weight of 1 kilogram, and there are tens of thousands of pieces of gold in it. The extra fraction, just treat it as a gift for you. Now, give me whoever I want, advertisement Li Yi said slowly. The underworld king sitting in front of him was slightly taken aback. The eyes are very surprised. Jin Bin's eyes swept across the hill like pile of gold nuggets in front of Li Yi. Suddenly, he smiled. With a bloated body, he stood up unsteadily, as if his figure was a little unsteady, and he even grabbed the umbrella beside him as a crutch. Mr. Li Yi, I am amazed by your performance. Before that, I would like to say hello to you solemnly and get to know you anew. Jin Bin said very politely. He offered to hold out his palm, wanting to shake hands and talk with Li Yi. Boom. The two palms were held together calmly, but a deep voice broke out. It's like a muscular monster on the ring, boxing and colliding. I suddenly felt that maybe I don't need so many people, I can get a good gift. A smile suddenly appeared on Jin Bing's face. Those twisted muscles looked like a demon smiling. Huge force erupted from his palm, which was a terrifying force comparable to that of a crane. Relying on the terrifying strength that surpassed ordinary people, Jin Bing once crushed alloy steel pipes with his bare hands, and also crushed the bones of countless masters. However, no matter how terrifying the strength he erupted, he still couldn't move the man in front of him. Li Yi frowned, then smiled. I didn't expect you to still have such a temper. If you want to do it, tell me earlier, and I don't have to bother to make an extra trip. Perhaps it was because the process of subduing the lizard men went so smoothly in the prison, which gave Li Yi some other ideas. I want to try to communicate more with these supervillains in this world, and try to recruit more subordinates. After all, coming to world number 2 now, one has to play something different. It's a pity that the performance of gold in the 2 worlds is exactly the same, cunning because of people with unwarranted self-confidence. Li Yi is the best at dealing with such supervillains. The majestic power exploded in an instant, and terrifying force stars raged. Every finger contains the power to tear dragons and snakes alive. Even the crazy green titan of number 1 world was returned to the form of Dr. Bruce Banner by Li Ding. Crack. A clear bone-cracking sound came from the palms of the 2 clenched hands. Jin Bing's face instantly turned red. Fine beads of sweat kept gushing out. Advertisement. The terrifying force almost tore his palm, and what was even more frightening was that the young man's hand grabbed him abruptly, unable to move. A few seconds later, Li Yi smiled and withdrew his palm. Isn't it good to be my dog? Do you have to challenge my patience? He calmly shook his hand and threw a dark red paste to the ground. 10,000 people, no matter what method you use, call me here now. If the number is not enough, use your head to make up. Li Yi said with a smile on his face, but that smile, in the eyes of Jin Bin at this moment, seemed extremely intimidating and terrifying. He never thought that there would be a human being who could defeat him head-on. There was a heart-piercing pain from above the wrist, and the original right hand had completely disappeared. Convinced. Jin is completely convinced. Okay, boss, no, master, I will follow your instructions. Jin Bin, who was sweating profusely, didn't care about bandaging the wound, so he quickly called his younger brother. Send an order, and all the gangsters in New York, including those who have lives in their hands, as well as the wild dogs wandering around the streets, are summoned to me. No, not only New York, but all the people related to the underground in the surrounding cities, I want it. 490 gold and said with gritted teeth. The execution ability of this underworld emperor is astonishing, which suits Li Yi's appetite very well. Not long after, Li Yi saw unusually long figures coming from all directions. Although, New York is a very prestigious international metropolis. However, behind the huge and luxurious high-rise buildings, the shadows hidden in the dark became more and more intense, and their bodies exuded a more or less evil aura. Obviously, those who can be summoned by Jin Bin are by no means kind and innocent people. Sacrifice of the dragon. Li Yi's expression became dark. As long as he promoted the dragon sacrifice, he could enter the 2nd stage of the Holy Master template. Not only the power of the 12 spells, but also the power of the 8 evil spirits can be mastered together. It has to be said that such strength is not a small temptation for him. Constantly underground members gathered from all directions, like bricks and stones one after another, building a huge and repeated dark altar. Suddenly, Li Yi frowned, and he looked sideways at the building beside him. On the top of the building, a middle-aged woman in a yellow cloak was looking at him indifferently. Impressive, yes. That woman turned out to be bald. Li Yi raised his eyebrows and tilted his head. It seems to have run into an acquaintance again. Chapter 133. The Battle in the Mirror World. Wait for me, Dormammu. For a moment, the surrounding environment changes rapidly and the light and shadow change. One after another, prism-like ripples appeared in the void. At that moment, Li Yi could clearly feel the change of time and space. Sandman and the Lizard Man were both wiped from him by an anomalous force at the same time. No, exactly. I was taken to another dimension alone. The surrounding city buildings change rapidly, operating at an angle that goes against common sense, and the entire space is as weird as a kaleidoscope, with countless cross-sections operating in a unique way. The woman who was standing on the tall building and staring at him coldly had appeared in front of him at this moment. Ancient One Magician, long time no see. Li Yi smiled politely. Even though he was in the mirror world constructed by Ancient One Magician, he was still calm. For him, there is nothing in this world that can arouse this man's mood swings, and he, who has conquered a world with his own hands, simply put the so-called harsh environment behind him. Any change in the environment is a novel experience in Li Yi's eyes. I don't want you to come here, villain from another world. Ancient One's complexion was very stern. On the chest, the necklace shining with green light, blooming with terrifying power of time and space. This is the supreme artifact passed down from generation to generation by Sorcerer Supreme, but it is also one of the 6 most important gems in the entire universe, Time Gem. Seeing the disgusted look on Ancient One Magician's face, Li Yi shook his head calmly. Whether you like it or not, I came here, didn't I? I think it's the best choice to accept me. He said indifferently, looking calmly at the mirror world created by Ancient One. In world number 1, Li Yi has also fought against the Supreme City, including Ancient One and Doctor Strange. The mirror worlds they construct are different, but from a basic level, the mirror world created by Ancient One is undoubtedly more profound and mysterious, full of many rules, and the mystery of its operation is difficult to fathom. Especially the Ancient One Magician, who forced himself back to the Shadow Kingdom and escaped from the shadow, his strength should not be underestimated. As an Asgardian here, I didn't want to interfere with the changes in fate, but your arrival has affected this environment. I saw a vision of the future, and the entire universe was barren. Time Gem is able to see everything that happened on the timeline and try to figure out countless possibilities. But at the end of time, I saw a darkness, and all the future was obscured by that elusive darkness. Ancient One said seriously, and 2 special folding fans appeared in his hands. Advertisement for Li Yi, she is cautious in everything she does. Since those Asgardians can't solve you, I will deal with it myself. I'm glad you came early enough. If you wait a few more years, maybe the problem will become more difficult. Ancient One said coldly, shot directly, and the mirror world changed accordingly. The mechanics here have undergone incredible changes, toppled up and down, front and back out of order, and a strong sense of weightlessness invaded, making Li Yi's figure stagger. Well, as expected, only one more fight can make people sit down and listen to me obediently. Li Yi smiled calmly, and punched out, although the Black Shadow Legion could not be summoned and was rejected by the world. But in the mirror world, that special world, the suppression seems to have weakened a lot. The emergence of a huge dark force made Li Yi's aura more mysterious and terrifying, like a demon king descended into the world. Boom. Completely shatter a building that hid directly, together with that space, into pieces. Li Yi stands in the mirror world, looking for the Ancient One Magician. Obviously, as the Ancient One who has lived for a long time, he has also accumulated rich experience in combat. The figure in the yellow cloak instantly transformed into thousands of prisms, shuttling between the prisms, waiting for an opportunity to attack Li Yi. However, what made Ancient One feel extremely desperate was that the man just stood there calmly, with his hands hanging down, but he didn't show any flaws. Every attack he tried to launch would be easily and calmly resolved by him. Have you played enough, Ancient One? Then I'm going to fight back? Li Yi smiled, stretched his hand down, and the palm of his hand touched the prism space under his feet, and the terrifying force directly turned the fragment over and knocked it up. No matter how precise the mirror space is, the foundation of the structure is nothing more than stability and balance. If uncontrolled forces appear in this space, what will be the consequences? Li Yi said leisurely, spread his hands to the sides, and then raised them high. After becoming the master of the dimension, his strength has already evolved to a higher level of dimension, and the so-called prism world in front of him has no effect on him at all. Rud. The sound of clothes being broken came from his body. The bulging muscles tore through the coat in an instant, revealing the ghostly muscle lines on the back. A blow from a ghost. With a bang punch, Li Yi hit the prism hard. The extremely terrifying fist smashed into the space under his feet. This punch surprised Ancient One. Advertisement she never expected that in just over a year, Li Yi's strength has become so much stronger. This is the strength of a dimension talent, and he can improve so quickly. It's really scary. At that moment, the terrible cracking sound rang through her mind. At the moment, the foundation of the whole world seemed to be shaken by that man. As the creator of the mirror space, when the world was devastated, even Ancient One was affected, and there was a tearing pain in his mind, and he was drowsy. With tough mind, she's still holding on, but she also knows. Facing the soaring Li Yi, she has no chance of winning, and even cannot avoid it. Dark Dimension, Dormammu, I need your power. At the critical moment, a stern look flashed in Ancient One's eyes. Under the current circumstances, if the mirror space is not consolidated, Li Yi can rush out of this space at any time and come to New York again. At that time, once the sacrifice of tens of thousands of people is formed, even the Ancient One has no way to restore it. The weirdness of time lies in this. At least for Ancient One, the Sorcerer Supreme, the past is unique, and once it happens, it cannot be changed. The real possibility lies only in the future. At this moment, she is silently chanting dark magic, communicating with a certain super, Swangs, existence above life in another dimension. Somewhere, a consciousness in another dark dimension came here. The dark breath permeated instantly, and the entire mirror world was stained with a trace of dark power. Li Yi suddenly smiled, very happily. He had a great idea, and it was worth a try. Looking at Ancient One who accepted Dormammu's dark power, his aura rose sharply, but his eyes gradually became more subtle. Before this, as the first sacrifice of 10,000 people, I planned to use gold and that guy's life to complete this sacrifice. But now, the Ancient One magician, who seems to have accepted the power of darkness, is more worthy of my choice. The dragon sacrifice requires 10,000 people to sacrifice, so as to awaken the sleeping dragon soul. The power of 10,000 wicked people is indeed mighty. But if it can be among these people, there are also some existences beyond human beings. The sacrificial power that Li Yi obtained will also become bigger and bigger. And now, he's eyeing a perfect prey. Chapter 134 The blood sacrifice of thousands of people, the most perfect thing, turns a man into a dragon. Boom. In the mirror world, the terrifying collision broke out again. Ancient One possessed the power of darkness, and also exuded an ominous and strange aura from his body. This Sorcerer Supreme is undoubtedly the best in the number 2 world. With regard to the control of magic, he is ahead of countless people, and even Scarlet Witch may not be able to compete with him. In Li Yi's guess, if it wasn't for the influence of the so-called protagonist Halo, maybe this Ancient One magician is the most powerful magician in this world. A soul full of kindness, in order to protect this world, has persisted for hundreds of thousands of years, pure and kind. At the same time, it attracts the dark power from another dimension. When good and evil coexist, light and darkness blend together. Such an excellent sacrifice is worth savoring carefully. Li Yi smiled with some salivation, not only for Ancient One, but also for Dormammu who is in the dark dimension. That existence seems to be a good sacrifice too, so. Just do it. Boom. The mirror space was constantly broken, but quickly repaired under the blessing of the dark power. With the power of the time gem, the Ancient One magician came again and again, constantly preventing Li Yi from destroying the space and returning to the real world. However, what surprised her in 890 was that every movement of this man seemed to be stronger than before. He is adapting to the rules of the mirror world. Crack. An extremely slight crack came into Ancient One's ears. She looked at this mirror world supported by dark forces in disbelief. This is simply the most successful masterpiece in her life. The whole world is filled with powerful dark magic power, which is indestructible and impossible to break. However, the thing that would not have happened at this moment happened in front of Ancient One. The man with a tyrannical breath stretched out his palm. The 5 fingers, like iron nails digging into the wall, firmly grasped the mirror world. His fingertips have already broken through the barriers of the world, and touched the present world again. With both hands, he grasped the dark mirror space that had reached the extreme, and with all his strength, he pulled it down. Crunch. The sharp and ear-piercing breaking sound kept appearing in the mirror world. The terrifying dark power also collapsed, and the powerful backlash impacted Ancient One's spirit in an instant. Advertisement in the dark, she could even feel that the Dormammu standing in the dark dimension showed a trace of fear. Is this why monsters are darker than dark? See bad. The inexplicable existence in another dimension is watching this scene in the mirror space. The dark power of Ancient One comes from this dimension. For a long time, Dormammu wanted to use the body of Ancient One to erode away reality, but this time, when his goal was most likely to be achieved, he hesitated for the first time. If there is such a terrifying existence in reality, will his attempt to invade lead to even more terrifying results? For example, a certain dark latitude suffered reverse invasion. Boom. The mirror world completely collapsed. The figure in the yellow cloak, like a cannonball, fell from the tall building at the speed of light. At the critical moment, it was Li Yi who shot and directly saved Tong Yi. This action, it shocked Ancient One extremely, but soon, her shock turned to fury. It took so much effort to get the most important sacrifice like you, why can't you just fall to your death like this? Li Yi smiled, and then slashed Ancient One's neck with a hand knife, causing her to pass out. At the same time, the man thoughtfully opened his white eyelids with his hands. Through those absent-minded pupils, Li Yi stared at Dormammu in the dark dimension. Existence in the dark dimension, immediately felt a sharp pain. The dark magic power he stretched out into the present world was forcibly taken away by that man. Wait obediently, I will come to you in a moment. Li Yi smiled, showing his white teeth, like a hungry beast looking for prey. Under the call of the underworld overlord, tens of thousands of underground members gathered outside Jinbin Company. Li Yi held the Ancient One magician in one hand, and walked slowly to the crowd. Everyone, now is the time to witness a miracle. All the sins on your body will be washed away. Dedicate your soul and body to me and become the solid cornerstone for the altar of the dragon. Li Yi roared and muttered in his heart. Advertisement. Dragon Priest, open. A terrifying force spread around him from the origin. One after another dragon and snake-like lines quickly spread between the interweaving and the void, binding all the underground members. Even Kim is no exception. The man ordered his assistant to bandage the wound on his right hand just now, but he also levitated into the air uncontrollably. Mr. Li Yi, no, master, I am your most loyal servant, don't kill me. I have gathered enough people according to your request. As a friend, I can provide you with sincere service, and you will need me. Jin Bin struggled and shouted, feeling the threat of death for the first time in his heart. No, that was a threat worse than death. At least after death, people's souls can return to heaven, and people like themselves will also fall into hell. But if it is controlled by Li Yi, it will be used to cast the solid foundation stone on the so-called altar. At that moment, tens of thousands of underground members suffered extremely terrifying torture. Their bodies turned into coke, and their souls poured into the dragon altar. The pitch-black flame rises up, accompanied by the blazing high temperature, burning the body, burning the soul. At this moment, New York, which was clearly daytime, was suddenly covered by a darkness that could not be seen. Li Yi didn't want these things to come out at critical moments and affect his dragon sacrifice. The voice did not fall. Facing Jin Bing's loud shout, Li Yi turned back calmly, narrowed his eyes slightly, and with a sincere smile, said, "As your master, when I encounter shouldn't as my loyal slave, shouldn't you be doing your part?" Jin Bing's body struggled hard in the terrifying black flames. After supporting for more than 10 seconds, it also melted into drops of pitch-black blood. Time Gem has already been taken down by Li Yi, like a toy stock in the palm of his hand. Thousands of people are sacrificed, the festival of the dragon. That means that his soul will be imprisoned in the altar for eternity, enduring the pain that cannot be exempted. In the black fire that engulfed everything, accompanied by a desolate and terrifying sound of dragon chant, the body of this sorcerer supreme also dissipated. Inside the altar, there is an unimaginably terrifying black flame attached to the body of Ancient One. That is one of the supreme forces representing this world. The most powerful sorcerer supreme has become the most powerful perfect sacrifice at this moment. As the souls of 9,999 people merged into one to form the dragon altar, all the power gathered on Ancient One. In the void, those ferocious runes like dragons and snakes have quickly formed. A huge force, soaring up on Li Yi's body, breaking through the sky. Chapter 135 Turning Death into Life, Looking for Lost Souls. Holy Lord, Li Yi. Loading complete, Phase 2 in progress. The blood of the dragon, perfect recovery. In Li Yi's mind, a faint reminder sounded. A source of terrifying power emerged around him. The powers of 12 different attributes can be embodied in the form of 12 spells, or they can be combined to form the supreme dragon body. Even, Li Yi could still feel the existence of that wave of magic energy. His body shape also underwent an astonishing change, and the creaking sound of muscles rubbing against bones came out from his tall body. The originally tall figure of nearly 2 meters skyrocketed in an instant, reaching a height of nearly 5 meters. On both sides of the forehead, accompanied by a burst of abnormal soreness, huge amounts of dragon horns also emerged. The thick and strong spine was also inexplicably stimulated. A dragon tail burning with black flames appeared slowly. Human skin is now replaced by a layer of indestructible dragon scales. At the moment, Li Yi is realizing the leap from man to dragon. Thanks to the sacrifice of Ancient One Magician, the awakening of the dragon's blood this time was perfect, even exceeding Li Yi's expectations. The power of the 12 spells perfectly fit into his body. Huge and burly body. It's like a blackened version with a more hideous image. The titan-like dragon monster, flapping its wings, descended slowly from mid-air. The empty streets seemed extremely silent. Tens of thousands of underground members have disappeared, and there are no bones left. Only Sandman and the Lizardmen were dumbfounded to witness this scene. They witnessed an incomparably cruel but brilliant ceremony. As Li Yi landed, the Lizardman's beast-like pupils shone with wisdom. He said in a muffled voice, "I finally understood why the first moment I saw my master, I felt a heart of surrender. In front of a real dragon, any sauropod existence would fall into frenzy." Call. Having successfully unlocked the perfect dragon's blood, Li Yi was in a very happy mood at this moment. He took a deep breath and exhaled an extremely fiery breath. Boom. The terrifying dragon's breath condensed the terrifying explosive power, destroying a building not far away again. Nice job, my boys. Dragons are lazy by nature. In front of Li Yi, who has transformed into a dragon, everything in the world seems insignificant, just like the piles of sand piled up by children on the beach. Everything can be completely destroyed by the gentle washing of the tide. Feeling the incomparably terrifying aura emanating from Li Yi, Sandman seemed very excited. Advertisement, Master, I have fulfilled all your requirements, my daughter, you can be resurrected. Before that, Sandman had never really had a bottom line in his mind. After all, he is very clear about the fact that people cannot be resurrected after death, and even those superheroes have given reasons why they cannot be resurrected. With today's technological means, it is completely impossible not to revive a dead girl. It was only after seeing Li Yi's unprecedented sacrifice of thousands of people. In Sandman's heart, a new hope emerged again. Such a powerful ability has an incredible force zone. This existence originally represented a kind of miracle. Perhaps this man does have the means to reverse life and death. After hearing Sandman's request, Li Yi calmly turned around and glanced at him. In the golden vertical pupils, there is a wild and tyrannical noble atmosphere. While I'm in a good mood, bring your daughter. There are not many times when I choose to keep my promises. Now Li Yi is on his head. As their master, he is full, and definitely has to feed the dog legs to have the strength to help him work hard, so he at the moment does not object to agreeing to Sandman's request. Coincidentally, he also wanted to try his newly acquired power. Yes, I am the one who wrote it. The fearful Sandman quickly dispatched and brought back the body of his daughter who had been hiding elsewhere. In terms of time, it is not even 24 hours since the girl passed away. The cold and pale body is very light. Li Yi watched Sandman's daughter calmly, stretched out huge amounts of sharp claws, fingertips, and touched the girl's eyebrows, turning death into life, turning stillness into movement, endowing all things with the power of the soul. This is one of the abilities controlled by the Holy Lord. Boom. The sky was covered with dark clouds, as if an astonishing lightning was brewing, and with Li Yi's sky-defying means, the girl who had died before was resurrected. Above the sky, the flickering thunderlight crashed down, and the terrifying thunderbolt instantly struck Li Yi's huge amounts of dragon head. Get out of here, I have the final say here. Li Yi raised his head fiercely, a tyrannical light flashed in the golden dragon's eyes, he opened his mouth, and spit out a terrifying dragon's breath. Asking for flowers. Boom. The dragon flames that defied the sky bombarded the dark clouds, abruptly breaking the originally pervasive clouds. In a blink of an eye, the clouds cleared and the fog cleared. Advertisement: the darkness that hung over New York also faded. However, countless ordinary people living in New York feel as if they are suppressed by an inexplicable force in their hearts. Accompanied by Li Yi's casting, the power of magic permeated the little girl's body. The originally stiff body softened slowly, and the pale little hand flicked slightly. Daughter. Saw signs of recovery for the little girl. Sandman was ecstatic, held her in his arms, and burst into tears. No need, just be so happy in a hurry. Although I resurrected her, her current soul is already defective. The real soul of this little girl, along with the passing of life, has gone to another place. 0. At this moment, I am just relying on the remaining breath on her body to resurrect the remnant soul. He wants to regain the soul for his resurrected daughter. No matter how many difficulties and obstacles there will be ahead. Sandman whispered, the will in his eyes was stronger than ever. Where did my daughter's soul go? I must get it back. Inadvertently, an extremely illusory soul was quietly burned into ashes. He turned his head and looked at his daughter. Sandman roared with indignation. He had infinite courage in front of his daughter, and he could even declare war on gods and demons. There was a little spark between the sharp dragon claws rubbing against each other. The tall and burly figure gradually became smaller. How'd I get to those places? Sure enough, although the lively and kind-hearted daughter is alive now, her eyes are extremely hollow, like a puppet, like a peddler. Continue to follow me. I will go to the places I mentioned just now. Anyway, if you walk through all these places, you can definitely find the soul of that little girl. Li Yi, who had recovered his human body, said softly, still with a mysterious and calm smile on his face. Shin. 0124015221 Filu 111,373,131. Li Yi thought for a while, and then said thoughtfully, heaven or hell, or in other words, the underworld and the underworld, or the so-called soul castle. Li Yi snapped his fingers and said calmly, very good. Li Yi said calmly, pouring a layer of cold water on Sandman's extremely frenzied heart. Chapter 136. We still have a captain, be planned in advance. When the center of New York was turned into ruins. After completing the dragon sacrifice, Li Yi slowly disappeared into the city with Sandman and the Lizard Man. The headquarters of S.H.I.E.L.D. A group of superheroes gathered together with dejected expressions. The beautiful pointed captain had a bruised face and had just undergone an operation. His fixed right arm was hung in front of his body and he coughed from time to time. In comparison, he is actually in pretty good shape. The playboy and big chable Mr. Tony Stark, known as Iron Man. He is still in the rescue room now, mentally calculating the micro-reactor in front of him that may break anytime. No one knows what that means. If the reactor explodes out of control, the terrible force will displace New York to the ground in an instant, and this bustling city with millions of people will return to its original state overnight. Sorry, my friends, 07, is our loss this time. Spider-Man said in great frustration. He put on the spider battlesuit again, but the shame in his heart still cannot be erased. Hang from a tree by the man with a cobweb. For Spider-Man, this will be an unforgettable humiliation in his life. In fact, little Spider-Man's situation is excellent, after all, because he was already in a coma at that time. He failed to participate in the subsequent battle of many superhero shots to jointly fight against Li Yi. Therefore, the injury on little Spider-Man's body is not serious, relying on the amazing resilience, it has almost healed now. There are not many superheroes gathered in S.H.I.E.L.D. There are still some who are still lying in the emergency room and receiving treatment. We miscalculated his strength. I didn't expect that man to be so powerful. The captain said with some annoyance. When he watched Li Yi helplessly, punching the Green Titan who was in a state of rage until he was stunned, the captain knew it. Big trouble. I don't understand why you still go to provoke him under such circumstances. We could have negotiated. Natasha Romanoff said, frowning. Advertisement. There was a hint of helplessness and remorse on her blushing face. God knows how broken she was when she heard such explosive news suddenly when she woke up from a lethargic sleep and felt exhausted all over her body. Many superheroes from S.H.I.E.L.D. actually fought against Li Yi. Then what is the purpose of negotiating everything I paid for? Even in the presidential suite to please Li Yi, Natasha Romanoff has almost used the soft body technique that she has practiced since she was a child to the limit. Hearing her question, many superheroes present fell silent. It would have been fine if they had won that battle, but they lost, and they lost so thoroughly that no one could resist Li Yi's fist. That man didn't even need to use other powers, he just used his own fists to beat the many superheroes gathered in New York to pieces. If that's the case, maybe we have to do something special. The power to guard this city is not enough, we need to gather some more people. Director Nick said with a frown. He carefully took out a communicator from his pocket. Although the palm-sized communicator looks a bit quaint, it is actually a high-tech product. Its technology is so developed that even today's beautiful tips cannot be imitated. Not even basic materials can be researched. Actually, we still have a captain. Nick said in a low voice, and decisively pressed the message on the communicator. At the same time, several superheroes who participated in the meeting with minor injuries also showed expressions of thought. Their strength is indeed not enough, but in today's world, the strong with extraordinary abilities are not limited to this group of people in New York, they also have the ability to make friends. In the next period of time, an even more terrifying force can be gathered. Hawkeye frowned, looking at the sky outside the window that had rapidly darkened and then gradually returned to light. I have an ominous premonition, maybe no matter how many people we gather, it won't have much effect. Have you ever thought that maybe he hasn't shown his true ability until today? Regarding Hawkeye's statement, many superheroes looked silent. There is no way, no matter what the future holds, we should try. This is the fate of heroes. The captain sighed and stood up slowly. At this moment, in the Stark Industrial Building on the other side of New York, a group of well-equipped top medical robots are constantly operating around Stark's body. Advertisement: there is no pain in the chest, only a vague numbness, like an electric current flowing through. But for Stark, this is the most life-threatening moment in his life. If you are not careful, that humble micro-reactor will release a devastating force. Li Yi, Stark gritted his teeth and said, feeling unprecedented humiliation. I have worked so hard to defeat those opponents, but in this man's mouth, they are a group of fools who are not as good as ordinary people. In the eyes of a genius, such an insult is absolutely unacceptable. Is it because the battle armor is not strong enough? Various models and versions can be developed with a special restraint system. Fortunately, he escaped this death. Mechanical transcends metal, but surpasses it. While the surgical treatment was being carried out rapidly, Stark's mind was constantly colliding with many thoughts. The most famous of these is undoubtedly the huge anti-Hulk armor. Stark murmured. From the perspective of wisdom 2.4 degrees, he is one of the top figures in the world. Laugh. It seems that the plan has to be advanced. People have weaknesses, and weaknesses can be exploited. A long time ago, he began to improve the steel armor in view of many possible situations. Stark, who survived the catastrophe, looked at the old reactor that seemed to be broken at any time. It's impossible for that man to have no weaknesses. Maybe his reaction is too fast, and conversely, our reaction ability is too slow to capture his fleeting weaknesses. The backup version of the planetary defense plan, the terminal of artificial intelligence. True artificial intelligence is by no means limited to metal armor. With the sound of mechanical activation, the miniature reactor on his chest was carefully removed, and then another reactor loaded with new elements was reinstalled. Definitely. For Stark, Mark 41, as his specially named Prodigal Son armor, also impressed him deeply. There was a quick, intelligent gleam in Stark's eyes. He has already stood on the unspeakable peak of knowledge that has real existence, and even looks far away from the other existences in the universe who also have such wisdom. Chapter 137. Come to Asgard, do what you want to do. Clouds and mist linger, and the sky is rippling with gorgeous and bright light. Li Yi took Sandman and the Lizardmen to walk in a vast sacred land. This is no longer the human world, at least it is no longer the blue planet where New York is located, but another distant planet that is far away from each other. Definitely, it's called Asgard by some. What is this place? Never seen such a sight. Sandman looked left and right, suddenly felt as if he had come to heaven. The Lizardman on the side even opened his mouth, puffed up his chest, and breathed the air frantically. This place is really beautiful. I smell a wonderful aroma. It's the smell of the food. Asgard, one of the 9 realms, may definitely be a little strange to you. Li Yi responded calmly. His purpose of coming here is very clear. First of all, I came here for the Infinity Gauntlet that was treasured in Odin's treasury. Since I got the time gem by mistake, I took off the glove and gathered a few other gems by the way. Even if that huge and bloated purple spirit can do something, it's understandable for me to do it. Li Yi said with a half smile. In his heart, he was even planning, when he gathered all the gems and snapped his fingers, how many creatures in the universe should be allowed to meet their grandmother. In the treasure house of definitely Asgard, there are other things that also make him curious. For example, the huge horn left by a certain flame demon, and the eldest daughter of a certain god king buried deep in the underground seal, and other things. Who? An angry scolding sound came from above the sky. A beam of sword light shone, and accompanied by a brilliant rainbow light, fell from the sky. The gatekeeper of Asgard, a tall deity with a golden horned helmet. The Patronus known among humans as Heimdall. The tall and burly patron saint stood in front of Li Yi, carefully staring at the 3 intruders. This is the sacred land of Asgard, and it was almost impossible for outsiders to enter in the past. As the king of the 9 realms, Odin blocked the external communication and exploration of the 9 realms thousands of years ago. His gaze fell on Li Yi, but he couldn't see through the darkness surging outside the man. Extremely pure, there is no distinction between good and evil, like the most essential power attached to his subordinates. In a daze, Heimdall took a step back, his expression stunned, as if he saw a ferocious dragon standing upright. This is the territory of Asgard, outsiders are not allowed to enter, get out of here. Advertisement, Heimdall said in a deep voice. The sudden man in front of him obviously didn't get God King Odin's permission. His arrival seemed to be full of accidents and seemed unpredictable. Sorry, I can't go now. Li Yi shook his head calmly, and he even reminded out of kindness. I suggest you go back to the palace of Asgard now and ask the God King for instructions. I know he seems to have collected some good treasures. I want to borrow them use. Seeing Li Yi's calm face, Heimdall's face showed a look of anger. Looking at the 9 realms, who would dare to claim the name of the king of the realms? What's more, the motive of this man in front of him is so weird. He wants to borrow some treasures from God King Odin. Shameless, arrogant and despicable. Heimdall angrily raised the long sword in his hand and slashed down unceremoniously. The next moment, with a deafening sound, this tall god flew upside down, like a meteor, hitting the central temple in Asgard. Boom! Heimdall's body suddenly crashed into the temple. The gatekeeper of Asgard, at this moment, did not know whether he was alive or dead. His face was pale and his breath was dying. I don't like nonsense, Li Yi said coldly, then stepped on Bifrost and continued to walk forward. In the glorious temple at the moment, a blonde-haired, burly young man was holding a silver-white warhammer in his forehand, looking at the fainted Patronus on the ground in astonishment. Who dares to attack Asgard? A violent roar came from the direction of the palace. Thunder roared, and a figure entwined with countless lightnings flew up into the air and came towards G. I am Thor. Sinner, report your name. Standing in the midst of the shining thunder, Thor's figure is extremely tall, his beard and hair are all stretched out, and his golden hair is entwined with lightning, expressing an irresistible anger. The Mjolnir in his hand also exuded an extremely terrifying aura, as if the next moment, there would be a divine thunder that would destroy the world. Li Yi. Advertisement in front of Thor, the man in black responded calmly. Looking at being in the thunder and lightning, incarnated as Thor, the real god of thunder, Li Yi suddenly smiled maliciously. Do you also want to protect the glory of the northern god? He said meaningfully. Thor, who didn't understand what Li Yi was talking about, saw that the man in front of him dared to smile contemptuously at him, and became more and more furious. No one dares touch the wrath of Asgard. Thor roared, raised Mjolnir high in his hand, and then smashed down. The dazzling thunder was extremely thick, condensing amazing destructive power. If it falls into the human world, it can even collapse a building in an instant. However, such a destructive means of 620 seems insignificant to Li Yi. I'm sorry, now you are not qualified to fight me. Li Yi said very calmly, then clenched his fist with his right hand and punched Thor in front of him. Boom! Another meteor flew upside down, and the young Thor, like the previous Heimdall, was also punched into the palace by Li Yi. What was even more tragic was that Li Yi was holding the warhammer with countless thunders tightly in his hand at this moment, unable to return to the master's call. Actually, there is one thing that I really want to try. There was a smile on the corner of Li Yi's mouth. He held the handle and continuously released lightning, bombarding his own Mjolnir. Spread 5 fingers and grabbed the front end of the war pendant. The power of terror erupted in an instant. Crack. Accompanied by an astonishing burst of electric light, the Mjolnir who was so hard that he even blessed the God Lord's secret spell. It shattered in his palm, turning into inconspicuous pieces, and the huge power of Thor dissipated in that instant. Thor, who fell in the ruins of the palace, struggled to raise his head. He watched in a daze that Mjolnir, who accompanied him in the battle, was destroyed in the hands of Li Yi. No. He let out an incomparably shrill and tragic wail.